The dispatch center of the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department was located in the dilapidated basement of an old building constructed in 1952. It had no windows facing outside. Its walls were nearly half a meter thick, built of gray concrete. Fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling flickered constantly, bathing the interior in a sickly green hue. For those who worked here, it was like a living tomb, with telephone lines and radio frequencies as their only connection to the outside world. 62-year-old dispatcher Hezekiah Butterworth had been taking over the night shifts for exactly 17 years. On one of the last days of November, at 11:43 p.m. on Thursday night, he was sitting hunched over at his console. He would explain the slight tremor in his hands to those who knew him as being from his blood pressure medication. The coffee cup in front of him had long since gone cold, but he kept sipping it anyway. That bitter taste was his only companion to help him stay awake. The night was busy, as befits a holiday weekend. 3 domestic disputes, 2 incidents of drunk driving, and a bar fight had been recorded. Fortunately, the bar fight had already dispersed before the patrol teams arrived. At that moment, Officer Clementine Fairweather was patrolling the northern part of the county. It was a rural area where houses were scattered and sparse, and the darkness made the emptiness feel even deeper. At 11:47 p.m., the emergency line lit up. 911, what is your emergency? Heavy breathing first, wet and labored. Then a male voice, elderly, with an accent that sounded displaced in time, like old recordings from the 1940s. He started again. After all these years, he started the count again. Sir, what is your location? Are you in danger? Bellwether Road, the old Ashcroft property. He's taking them to the basement just like his grandfather did. Who is taking who, sir? I need you to... The line disconnected. Hezekiah initiated a trace, but the system returned an error, no location data available. That happened sometimes with old landlines or disconnected numbers, but it always made him uneasy. He radioed Officer Fairweather. Unit 23, this is dispatch. Go ahead, Hez. Her voice was clear, professional. She was 28, former military police. 2 tours in Afghanistan, one of their best. Got a strange call mentioning the Ashcroft property on Bellwether Road. Caller said someone's taking people to a basement. Your closest. Copy that, I know the place. Been abandoned since the 80s, I'll check it out. Approach with caution. Caller sounded distressed. 10-4. While Fairweather drove to the location, Hezekiah pulled up property records. The Ashcroft estate, 200 acres, last occupied 1982. Owner, Zebulon Ashcroft, deceased, October 1982. No listed cause of death in the public records. The property had been tied up in legal battles ever since. Unpaid taxes, missing heirs, environmental protection claims. 20 minutes passed before Fairweather radioed back. Dispatch, I'm at the Ashcroft property. Gate's been forced open recently. Chains cut clean through. Fresh tire tracks leading in, requesting backup. Copy that. Unit 15 is 20 minutes out. I'm going to approach the house on foot. Multiple vehicles parked outside. 3 vans, all with out-of-state plates. Hezekiah's pulse quickened. 3 vans suggested organized activity, not kids partying or vagrants squatting. 5 minutes of radio silence. Then Fairweather's voice, low and tense. Dispatch, I've got eyes on the house. Lights in the basement windows. I can see movement. Multiple individuals. Wait. Jesus Christ. Unit 23, report. There are people in cages. I can see them through the basement windows. At least 4, maybe more. They look bad. Malnourished. I'm calling for state police and EMS. Negative on approach until backup arrives. Copy that, but someone's coming out. The sound of a car door opening came through the radio, footsteps on gravel. Sheriff's Department, stop where you are, hands where I can see them. A gunshot cracked through the radio, then another. Fairweather's voice. Shots fired, suspect is armed. Static. Unit 23, respond. Nothing. Hezekiah triggered every alarm he had. All units, officer down. Bellwether Road at the Ashcroft property. Shots fired, officer not responding. The next 18 minutes felt like hours. Units converged from 3 counties. State police, local deputies, even off-duty officers who heard the call. They found Fairweather behind her patrol car, unconscious, bleeding from a head wound where she'd been struck with something heavy. Her service weapon was missing. The house was worse than her description suggested. In the basement, they found 11 people in various states of deterioration. Some had been there for months, living in dog cages barely large enough to lie down in. The smell was overwhelming. Human waste, infected wounds, death. 2 victims were already deceased, their bodies showing signs of prolonged starvation and abuse. The perpetrators, 3 men and 2 women, had tried to flee, but were caught 2 miles away when their van broke down. They were members of something they called the Family of Truth, led by a man named Marcus Ashcroft, grandson of the property's original owner. As paramedics worked on the survivors, Hezekiah coordinated the response from dispatch, but his mind kept going back to the initial call, the elderly man who'd warned them. How had he known? The answer came 3 days later when one of the survivors, a woman named Patricia Webb, who'd been held for 6 months, was finally able to speak. There was another prisoner, she whispered to investigators. An old man. He'd been there the longest, years maybe. He was in a separate room, treated differently. They called him Grandfather. He had phone access sometimes. Said he was family, but wrong family. Said he'd been trying to call for help, but the phones were blocked except for certain times. They searched the property again and found a hidden room behind the basement wall. Inside was evidence someone had lived there for years, a cot, dozens of journals filled with dates and names, and an old rotary phone connected to a junction box that bypassed the main line. But no old man, no grandfather. The journals were the most disturbing discovery. They documented 40 years of kidnappings, murders, and disposals. Zebulon Ashcroft had started it in 1971, taking hikers and drifters, people who wouldn't be missed. He'd built the cage system, developed the methods. When he died in 1982, suicide by hanging, they finally discovered, his son Samuel had taken over. Samuel had died in 2001, and his son Marcus had inherited the family business. 3 generations of killers, operating from the same property. The entries went back decades, methodical records of victims. November 15, 1978, caught Hezekiah's eye. Tommy Brennan, construction worker. Taken from night shift at development site. Disposed of in Eastern Field, under oak marked with cross. Hezekiah's blood ran cold. Tommy Brennan, he knew that name. He'd worked construction before joining the sheriff's department. In 1978, he'd been scheduled to work a night shift clearing land for a development project. A project on county land adjacent to the Ashcroft property. He'd called in sick that night, too hungover to operate heavy machinery safely. Tommy had covered for him. Tommy had never come home. His disappearance had been big news. Search parties, investigations, theories about mob connections or gambling debts. But nothing had ever been found until now. They found Tommy's remains exactly where the journal indicated. along with 17 other victims buried across the property. Dental records confirmed the identifications. Families who'd waited decades for answers finally had closure. But one mystery remained: the old man who'd made the call. Investigators theorized he might have been another family member, possibly Samuel's brother, kept prisoner as punishment for some transgression, or perhaps a long-term victim who'd gained special status through Stockholm Syndrome. They'd probably never know for sure. Marcus Ashcroft and his accomplices were charged with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and torture. During interrogation, Marcus showed no remorse. "We were continuing grandfather's work," he said calmly. "Population control. Removing the weak, the useless, the ones society wouldn't miss. It was a family tradition." When asked about the old man in the hidden room, Marcus's expression changed for the first time. A flicker of fear. "Uncle Theodore," he said quietly. "Grandfather's brother." He disagreed with the family's work, so grandfather kept him as insurance, alive but controlled. He was supposed to die years ago, but he just wouldn't. We kept him fed, medicated, contained, but lately he'd been getting out of his room somehow, getting to phones. "Where is he now?" Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. The room was empty when we checked that morning. The door was still locked from the outside. It's impossible, but he was just gone." They never found Theodore Ashcroft. The investigation revealed he'd been reported dead in 1983, a year after his brother's suicide. His death certificate was signed by a doctor who'd lost his license in 1985 and disappeared shortly after. Another fabrication in a long line of lies. Officer Fairweather recovered from her injuries but suffered permanent hearing loss in one ear. She returned to duty 6 months later, insisting on taking the night shift. "That's when the real work happens," she said, "when the monsters think everyone's asleep." Hezekiah couldn't shake the guilt about Tommy Brennan. If he'd worked his shift that night in 1978, it would have been him in that unmarked grave. The randomness of survival, the thin line between victim and survivor, it haunted him. 3 months after the arrests, Hezekiah was working another night shift when the emergency line rang at exactly 11:47 p.m. "911, what is your emergency?" Static first, then that same elderly voice from months ago. "Thank you, Dispatcher Butterworth. The count is finished now. 40 years of counting, finally done." "Theodore? Theodore Ashcroft? Where are you?" "Where I've always been. Where I'll always be. In the walls, in the foundation. This house was built on blood, Dispatcher. Every board, every nail, paid for with someone's life. I tried to stop them, but family is family. So I became part of the house itself, watching, counting, waiting for someone to listen." "Sir, tell me your location. We can help you." "You already did." "You stopped them. The count is complete. No more names will be added. I can rest now. The line went dead. They traced the call. It came from inside the Ashcroft house, which had been sealed and empty for months, pending demolition. Police searched every room, every wall, every crawl space. They found nothing except an old phone in the wall, wired into the original junction box from the 1950s. It shouldn't have worked. The power had been cut, the phone lines disconnected. But when they tested it, it rang. No one answered. The house was demolished 2 weeks later. In the foundation, workers found human remains that had been mixed into the concrete. Multiple bodies, decades old, impossible to identify. The construction record showed the foundation had been poured in 1951 by Zebulon Ashcroft's father, establishing a grim family tradition that had lasted 70 years. The official report concluded that Theodore Ashcroft had likely died years ago, and the calls were made by an accomplice who'd had access to the property. Case closed, evidence sealed, But Hezekiah knew differently. He'd heard that voice, felt the weight of those 40 years of watching and waiting. Some prisons weren't made of bars or concrete. Some were made of family loyalty and the terrible weight of knowledge you couldn't share. He worked at the dispatch center for another 5 years before retiring. On quiet nights, when the phones were silent and the radio crackled with static, he sometimes thought he heard that elderly voice counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 40 victims over 40 years. The count was complete. But somewhere in another town, another family might be starting their own count. And somewhere, another dispatcher would have to listen, have to decide whether the voice on the line was madness or a desperate cry for help. That was the real horror of the job. Not the crimes you heard about, but the ones you might miss. The calls that sounded crazy until they weren't. The voices dismissed as pranks until bodies were found. Every dispatcher knew the protocol. Treat every call as real until proven otherwise. Because sometimes the most unbelievable stories were the ones that saved lives. The trial of Marcus Ashcroft and his accomplices dominated the news for months. 3 generations of systematic murder, 40 confirmed victims, and evidence suggesting there might be more. The prosecution had an airtight case. Journals, remains, survivor testimony. It should have been straightforward, but nothing about the Ashcroft case was ever straightforward. Hezekiah was called to testify about the initial 911 call. He sat in the witness box, describing the elderly voice that had warned them, the voice they now believed belonged to Theodore Ashcroft. The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Catherine Miles, zeroed in on this point. Mr. Butterworth, you claim Theodore Ashcroft made this call, yet Theodore Ashcroft was declared dead in 1983. Do you have any proof it was him? The survivors identified him from old photographs. He'd been held in that hidden room for years. But no one actually saw him make the call, correct? And his body was never found. That's correct. So, it's possible someone else made that call? Someone who's still out there? The question hung in the courtroom like a threat. That night, back at the dispatch center, Hezekiah couldn't shake the feeling that they'd missed something. He pulled up all the records related to the Ashcroft family, going back to the 1940s when Zebulon's father, Abraham Ashcroft, had first purchased the property. Abraham Ashcroft had been a mortician who'd moved from Louisiana under mysterious circumstances. Newspaper archives showed he'd been questioned in the disappearances of several vagrants, but never charged. He'd died in 1971, the same year his son Zebulon's killing spree began. Pattern after pattern, generation after generation. At 2:14 a.m., Officer Fairweather called in from her patrol. Hez, I'm at the old Ashcroft property. No, I'm not supposed to be here, but something's bothering me. Clementine, that's a crime scene. It's off limits. I know, but listen. The demolition crew found something today. A second basement below the first. They didn't go in. Said it smelled too bad. But Hez, if there's a sub-basement we didn't know about. I'm calling backup to your location. Already here. I've got Morrison and Banks with me. We're going in. Hezekiah listened tensely as they descended. Their voices echoed strangely through the radio, distorted by the concrete and earth above them. Jesus, Morrison's voice. This is older than the rest of the house. Look at these walls, fieldstone and mortar. This could be from the original structure, maybe 1890s. There's something here, Fairweather said. Shelves full of... Are these jars? Don't touch anything, Banks warned. This could be... Oh, God. Oh, my God. What? What is it? The jars. They're full of... They're preserved. Human organs. Hearts, kidneys, eyes. There must be hundreds. Hezekiah was already dispatching crime scene units and calling the FBI. This went beyond local jurisdiction now. The sub-basement turned out to be a massive find. Not just preserved organs, but detailed medical records going back to the 1920s. The Ashcroft family had been harvesting from their victims for 5 generations, not 3. Abraham hadn't been the first. His father, Josiah, had started the practice in Louisiana before being run out of town. The records were meticulous. Blood types, tissue samples, genetic markers. They'd been conducting some kind of long-term biological experiment, selective breeding program, or organ harvesting operation. The prosecutors had to completely restructure their case. During this chaos, Marcus Ashcroft requested to speak with Hezekiah directly. Against advice, Hezekiah agreed to visit him in county jail. Marcus sat calmly in the interview room, hands folded, looking more like a college professor than a serial killer. He was 34, clean-shaven, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see too much. "Dispatcher Butterworth, thank you for coming. What do you want, Marcus?" "To warn you. You found the sub-basement. Good, but you haven't found the network." "What network?" Marcus leaned forward. "You think we were alone?" "One family on one property. We're part of something much larger, a collective that's operated for over a century, trading resources, sharing methods, protecting each other." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check your missing persons reports from the last 50 years. Look for patterns, clusters around certain properties, certain families. The Ashcrofts in Millbrook, the Grimswalds in Riverside County, the Coldwells in Pine Ridge. 7 families, 7 properties, all connected." Hezekiah tried to keep his expression neutral, but Marcus caught something. "You've heard the name Grimwald before, haven't you?" He had. 3 years ago, a strange 911 call about screams from the old Grimwald farm. They'd investigated, found nothing. The caller had never been identified. "Theodore wasn't the only one who tried to stop us," Marcus continued. "There were others, family members who grew conscious. They're kept contained, controlled, but sometimes they break through. Sometimes they call for help. How many strange calls have you dismissed over the years, dispatcher? How many cries for help have you ignored?" That night, Hezekiah couldn't sleep. He went back through 17 years of dispatch logs, flagging every unusual call that had been dismissed as pranks or mental health issues. The pattern Marcus described began to emerge. Clusters of strange calls around 7 properties, spanning 3 states. He brought his findings to FBI agent Patricia Reeves, who'd taken over the federal aspect of the case. "We've been tracking similar patterns," she admitted. "After Marcus's arrest, we received tips from other jurisdictions. Similar operations, similar methods. We're looking at a possible network of serial killer families, possibly connected through online dark web forums." "How many victims are we talking about?" "Conservative estimate? Hundreds, maybe thousands over the decades. The investigation expanded exponentially. Task forces were created for each of the 7 properties Marcus had named. 3 were still occupied. 2 families fled before police arrived, leaving behind evidence of hasty evacuation, burned documents, destroyed hard drives, empty cages. The 3rd family, the Grimswalds, were arrested after a standoff that lasted 18 hours. In their compound, investigators found 12 living victims and evidence of at least 30 more killed over 20 years. Captain Thaddeus Grimwald, the family patriarch at 71 years old, was more talkative than Marcus. He seemed proud of their work. "We're preserving the old ways," he said during interrogation. "Before modern society made everyone soft. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. We're just helping evolution along. By murdering innocent people? Innocent? Every person we took was carefully selected. The weak, the sick, the ones who contributed nothing. We studied them first, sometimes for months. Medical histories, psychological profiles, genetic screening. We only took those who wouldn't strengthen the human gene pool. It was eugenics wrapped in murder, pseudoscience justifying slaughter. The investigation revealed the families communicated through coded messages in obituaries, seemingly innocent phrases that contained instructions, warnings, and updates. Died peacefully at home meant a successful acquisition. Survived by loving family indicated the network was intact. In lieu of flowers was a call for assistance. They'd been hiding in plain sight for generations. One night, while reviewing evidence from the Grimwald property, Hezekiah noticed something that chilled him. A journal entry from 1978. The Ashcroft acquisition of T. Brennan was unplanned but necessary. Original target H. Butterworth proved unavailable. Substitution approved by counsel. Counsel. There was a leadership structure. He dug deeper, cross-referencing dates and locations. The 7 families appeared to meet annually, always during the last week of October, always at a different location. The next meeting would be in 3 days. Agent Reeves mobilized every available resource. They identified the likely location, an abandoned summer camp in the mountains, purchased through a shell company linked to one of the families. Surveillance drones confirmed activity. Vehicles arriving from multiple states, guards posted at entrance points. The raid was planned for October 29th at 3 a.m. Hezekiah insisted on being in the mobile command unit, monitoring communications. He listened as tactical teams moved into position, as negotiators prepared scripts, as medical teams staged for potential victims. At 3 a.m. exactly, the operation began. All teams, green light, execute, execute, execute. The radio erupted with coordinated chaos. Multiple breaches, flashbang grenades, shouted commands. Then, Command Team Alpha. We've got a problem. The main lodge is empty. Repeat, empty quote. Team Beta here. Cabins are vacant. No sign of recent occupation. Team Gamma found something. Underground bunker beneath the dining hall, sealed door requesting breaching equipment. It took 40 minutes to break through the reinforced door. What they found inside changed everything. 23 people seated around a conference table, all dead. Poison, by the looks of it. Mass suicide. At the head of the table sat an elderly man who matched the description of Theodore Ashcroft. He was holding a handwritten note, "The count is complete." The old ways die with us. We chose this ending rather than corruption by modern justice. Tell dispatcher Butterworth he was always meant to listen. Some voices can only be heard by those who've escaped their fate. Forensics determined they'd been dead for approximately 6 hours. They'd known the raid was coming. Among the dead were the missing heads of 5 of the 7 families, plus 18 others. Lawyers, doctors, business owners, all seemingly respectable citizens who'd been part of the network. Their records, deliberately left intact, revealed the full scope of the operation. 537 confirmed victims over 90 years. Detailed medical experiments. Organ trafficking to underground medical facilities. A self-contained economy of death. But 2 family leaders were missing. Marcus Ashcroft and another man, David Coldwell, both supposedly in custody. When police checked, they found elaborate substitutions had been made. The men in cells were lookalikes, actors hired through intermediaries who thought they were participating in a social experiment. The real Marcus Ashcroft and David Coldwell had been free for weeks. That night, Hezekiah was back at dispatch when the emergency line rang at exactly 11:47 p.m., the same time as that first call months ago. "Hello, Dispatcher Butterworth." It was Marcus. "We're the last," he said calmly. "David and I. The others chose the coward's way, but we remain. The work continues. Just the two of us now, smaller, more careful, invisible. We'll find you." "No, you won't." "Because we've learned. No more properties, no more patterns, no more families. Just two men who know how to disappear, how to hunt, how to preserve the old ways in a new world. Every missing person, every unexplained disappearance, you'll wonder if it's us. And sometimes it will be." "Why call me?" "Because you were supposed to be one of us." That night in 1978, you were selected not as a victim, but as a recruit. Young, intelligent, already comfortable with death and violence from your construction work. But you called in sick, broke the pattern. Tommy Brennan died in your place, and our careful plans unraveled. You're insane. Perhaps. Or perhaps we're the only sane ones left, willing to do what nature demands. Population control, genetic selection, survival of the strongest. The world is drowning in weakness, dispatcher. We're just trying to bail out the boat. Where are you calling from? Closer than you think. Maybe I'm in the next county. Maybe I'm in your neighborhood. Maybe I'm watching your apartment right now. You'll never know. But I'll always be listening, just like you. Two sides of the same emergency line. The call ended. The trace showed it came from Hezekiah's own cell phone, which was sitting on the console in front of him. Impossible. But there it was in the log. They never found Marcus Ashcroft or David Coldwell. Over the next 5 years, disappearances that fit their profile occurred across the country. Isolated victims, no bodies found, no evidence left behind. The FBI maintained a task force, but leads always went cold. Hezekiah worked 3 more years before retiring. On his last night, he received one final call at 11:47 p.m. "The count never really ends, dispatcher," Marcus's voice said. "It just starts over. 1, 2, 3, 4, then dial tone." In his retirement, Hezekiah wrote a training manual for dispatchers. Recognizing critical calls, when unbelievable stories save lives. It became required reading at emergency dispatch centers nationwide. The key message: never dismiss a call, no matter how impossible it sounds. Because somewhere out there, predators are counting their victims, and sometimes the only warning is a voice on the line that doesn't quite make sense. The Ashcroft property was eventually cleared and turned into a memorial garden for the victims. 40 trees were planted, one for each confirmed death. But locals say if you stand there at night, especially around 11:47, you can sometimes hear a phone ringing somewhere beneath the earth. No one ever answers it. They know better now. 5 years had passed since Marcus Ashcroft's escape. 5 years of searching, following leads that evaporated like morning mist, chasing shadows across state lines. Hezekiah was 67 now, officially retired but consulting with the FBI task force. His apartment had become a second command center, maps on walls, red strings connecting disappearances, boxes of files that his pension couldn't justify but his conscience demanded. Officer Clementine Fairweather had been promoted to detective, heading the cold case division with a focus on the Ashcroft network. She visited Hezekiah weekly, bringing coffee and fresh files, picking his brain about patterns only he seemed to see. "We've got 3 new disappearances that fit the profile," she said on a gray Tuesday morning in March. Isolated victims, no family connections, medical conditions that made them vulnerable. Hezekiah studied the files. A diabetic woman from Missouri, vanished from a rest stop. A man with early-stage Alzheimer's from Arkansas walked out of his care facility and never returned. A teenager with severe autism from Oklahoma disappeared during a camping trip. They're hunting the weakest, he said, just like Thaddeus Grimwald described, but smarter now. No pattern to the locations, no timeline consistency. They've learned. The FBI profilers think Marcus and Coldwell have split up, covering more ground separately. No. Hezekiah pulled out a map he'd been working on. Look at the disappearances over the last 5 years. Draw a line between each one in chronological order. Clementine traced the path with her finger. It formed a rough spiral, closing inward toward a central point. They're not running, Hezekiah continued. They're circling back. The center of this spiral. Millbrook County, they're coming home. That night, Hezekiah couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, police scanner crackling with routine calls, when something made him freeze. A dispatcher, Janet, who'd taken over his position, was handling a welfare check. Unit 15. Check on elderly male at 1847 Wyndham Road. Neighbor reports he hasn't been seen in a week. Mail piling up. 1847 Wyndham Road. Hezekiah grabbed his phone, called Clementine immediately. That address, 1847 Wyndham. Same numbers as the Ashcroft property's original plot number from the 1890s. It's a message. Could be coincidence. When has anything about this case been coincidence? Clementine dispatched units immediately, but they were 20 minutes out. Hezekiah was already in his car, driving toward Wyndham Road. He knew he shouldn't. He wasn't a cop anymore, had no authority, no backup. But something pulled him forward, the same instinct that had saved him that night in 1978 when he'd called in sick. Wyndham Road was in the industrial part of town, mostly abandoned warehouses and empty lots. Number 1847 was a derelict factory that had manufactured textiles until the 1990s. The windows were boarded, walls covered in graffiti, parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds, but there were fresh tire tracks leading to a loading dock around back. Hezekiah parked a block away, texted his location to Clementine, and approached on foot. His old service weapon was in his glove box. He wasn't licensed to carry anymore, but he left it there. If Marcus was here, a gun wouldn't stop him anyway. The man had survived 5 years as America's Most Wanted. The loading dock door was ajar. Beyond it, darkness that seemed to breathe. Inside, the factory floor stretched out in shadows. Moonlight filtered through holes in the roof, creating pools of pale illumination. The machinery stood silent, draped in dust and decay, but there was a path through the grime. Footprints, recent, leading deeper into the building. Hezekiah followed them to a freight elevator that shouldn't have power, but hummed when he pressed the button. It descended slowly, cables groaning, taking him down to sub-basements that weren't on any city planning documents. The doors opened on a nightmare. It was a medical facility, pristine and modern, hidden beneath the decay above. Operating tables, surgical equipment, monitoring devices, all state-of-the-art. And in beds along one wall, 5 people hooked to IVs and monitors, alive but unconscious. Impressive, isn't it? Hezekiah spun. Marcus Ashcroft stood behind him, older now, beard grown out, but those intelligent eyes unchanged. Beside him was David Coldwell, shorter, stockier, holding a syringe. "Hello, dispatcher," Marcus continued. "We've been waiting for you. The spiral pattern. You wanted me to find it. Of course. This reunion has been 5 years in the making. You see, we've evolved our methods. No more crude cages and starvation. We've become more medical. Organ harvesting, yes, but also experimentation. Genetic modification. trying to create the perfect human specimens my great-great-grandfather dreamed of. These people are volunteers in a way. We select those whose lives are ending anyway. Terminal illnesses, degenerative conditions. We offer them a choice: die slowly, painfully, forgotten, or contribute to something greater. Some agree, others, well, sedation helps with consent issues. You're insane. Am I? Look at our work. Marcus gestured to monitors showing medical data. Subject 3 had pancreatic cancer, 2 months to live. Now, after our interventions, the cancer is in complete remission. We're not just taking life, dispatcher, we're transforming it. Through murder and torture, through sacrifice and progress. Every medical advancement requires subjects. We're just honest about it. David Coldwell stepped forward, syringe raised. Enough talking. We should proceed with the acquisition. But Marcus held up a hand. Not yet. He needs to understand. Dispatcher Butterworth, do you know why you're really here? You led me here, yes, but why? Why you specifically? Marcus pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. Your medical records, obtained through various channels. You're dying, aren't you? The tremor in your hands isn't just from blood pressure medication. It's early-stage Parkinson's. Your doctor gave you, 5 good years? Maybe 10 before you're completely incapacitated? Hezekiah's throat went dry. He'd told no one about the diagnosis, not even Clementine. We can fix that, Marcus continued. Our research into neurological disorders has been groundbreaking. Subject 2 over there had advanced Alzheimer's. Now, look at his brain scans. Complete reversal of degradation. We could do the same for you. At what cost? Service. Join us. Your expertise in emergency response, pattern recognition, system analysis, invaluable. Help us select better subjects, more willing participants. Make the process more humane. Transform our work from crude predation into genuine medical revolution. You want me to help you kill people. I want you to help us save the ones worth saving. Natural selection guided by intelligence rather than random chance. The sound of sirens became audible above, growing closer. David looked nervous. Marcus, we need to go. There's nowhere to run, Hezekiah said. I texted my location. The building's surrounded by now. Marcus smiled. You think we didn't plan for this? David, initiate Protocol 7. Coldwell moved to a control panel, began entering commands. The monitors started flashing warnings. Emergency ventilation activated. You have a choice, dispatcher, Marcus said calmly. In 30 seconds, this room will fill with aerosolized sedative, the same compound we've perfected over 5 years. Everyone here, including you, will be unconscious in minutes. The subjects will die without their life support. 5 innocent people, dead because you had to be the hero. You're bluffing. Am I? You know our history. Would we hesitate to kill 5 to preserve our work? But if you press that red button, he pointed to an emergency stop on the wall. The ventilation stops. Of course, the button also seals the elevator, trapping you here with us until the gas disperses. About 4 hours. Plenty of time for us to convince you of our perspective. The hiss of gas began, subtle but unmistakable. Alarms upstairs, muffled by concrete and earth. Clementine's voice on a bullhorn, barely audible. Choose, dispatcher. Save them and be trapped with us, or let them die and escape. You have 10 seconds. Hezekiah moved without thinking, slammed the button. The ventilation stopped, but he heard the elevator locks engage with a definitive click. Trapped. Marcus actually applauded. I knew you would. The same instinct that made you save all those people over 17 years of dispatch. You can't help but respond to emergencies. The FBI will break through. Eventually, but we have hours, and so much to show you. What followed was the longest 4 hours of Hezekiah's life. Marcus and Coldwell didn't torture him, didn't threaten. Instead, they presented their research with the passion of true believers. Genetic modifications that eliminated hereditary diseases. Organ cultivation that could end the transplant waiting lists. Neural mapping that could cure paralysis. All built on a foundation of murder. Your grandfather started this as crude eugenics, Hezekiah said. You've just dressed it up in better science. Evolution, Marcus corrected. Every generation refines the process. My son will refine it further. You have a son? Somewhere safe. Being raised with proper values. The work will continue even if we don't. The sound of cutting tools on the elevator doors began 2 hours in. Marcus didn't seem concerned. "Let me show you something," he said, leading Hezekiah to a secured room. Inside were filing cabinets, thousands of documents. Every family in the network kept records, not just of victims but of successes. People we let go because they showed potential. People we helped evolve. He pulled out a file. Hezekiah's name was on it. You were selected in 1978, but not as a victim, as a recruit. Your psychological profile, gathered through various means, showed exceptional pattern recognition, moral flexibility under pressure, and most importantly, the ability to rationalize necessary evils. Perfect for our work. You called in sick that night, not because you were hungover, but because something felt wrong. Your subconscious recognized the danger. That instinct saved you, but it also marked you as special. We've been watching ever since. The file contained surveillance photos spanning decades. Hezekiah at work, at home, at his wife's funeral, his children's graduations. Every major moment of his life documented. You're lying. This is manipulation. Is it? Why do you think you were so good at dispatch? You could hear patterns others missed, recognize emergencies others dismissed. Because you think like us. You think like a predator, always calculating, always analyzing. You just chose to use it to save rather than select. The elevator doors burst open then, FBI tactical teams flooding in. Marcus and Coldwell surrendered without resistance, hands raised, smiling. "Check the subjects," Marcus called out as they cuffed him. "They'll need immediate medical attention. Their files are in the blue cabinet, treatment protocols included. We're not monsters. We keep detailed medical records." As they led him past Hezekiah, Marcus stopped. "The offer stands, dispatcher. Your Parkinson's will progress. When you're desperate enough, you'll remember what we could have done for you. What we still could do, if you're willing to pay the price." Then he was gone, led up to justice that had been 5 years coming. The 5 subjects survived barely. Each had been taken within the last month. All had terminal diagnoses. And surprisingly, all showed signs of medical improvement. The ethics committees that reviewed the case couldn't explain it. The treatments Marcus had developed actually worked. Monstrous methods had produced miraculous results. 3 of the victims, when they recovered enough to speak, said they had agreed to the procedures. They'd been dying, desperate, and Marcus had offered them hope. The other 2 had no memory of their capture. The facility contained enough evidence to close hundreds of missing persons cases. Not just victims, but, as Marcus had said, people they'd observed and released. A twisted catalog of human selection spanning a century. In the deepest part of the facility, they found something else, a nursery. Recently used, based on the formula bottles and diapers. Marcus's son, wherever he was younger than they'd thought. Maybe 2 or 3 years old, young enough to grow up without memories of his father, or young enough to be thoroughly indoctrinated. The trial was a sensation. Marcus and Coldwell were both sentenced to death, though appeals would drag on for years. During sentencing, Marcus made one final statement. "History will vindicate us." When genetic diseases are eliminated, when organs can be grown rather than harvested, when humanity achieves its true potential, remember that it started here. In darkness and blood, yes, but all birth is bloody. We were midwives to the future. Hezekiah testified at the trial, his Parkinson's now visible in the tremor of his hands as he took the oath. Marcus watched him the entire time, that knowing smile never wavering. 6 months later, Hezekiah's condition worsened faster than predicted. The medication stopped working. The tremors became violent. Walking became difficult. His doctor was baffled. The progression didn't match typical Parkinson's. One night, unable to sleep from the muscle spasms, Hezekiah found himself reading Marcus's research, which had been declassified after the trial. The neural regeneration protocols were fascinating, decades ahead of current medical science, and there, in a footnote, was a reference to induced Parkinson's-like symptoms using a specific compound, reversible with proper treatment. The implication hit him like cold water. His disease might not be natural. They might have been poisoning him somehow, for years, waiting for him to get desperate enough to accept their help. He called Clementine immediately. "We need to test my blood for synthetic compounds. If they've been dosing me, we'll figure it out," she assured him. "We'll find a treatment." But deep down, Hezekiah wondered if Marcus had won after all. Even from death row, he'd planted a seed of doubt. Every tremor, every symptom, could be natural or could be induced. The uncertainty was its own torture. The search for Marcus's son continued, but the trail had gone cold. Somewhere, a child was being raised by someone connected to the network. Learning the family trade, perhaps. Or maybe, hopefully, living a normal life, ignorant of his heritage. Hezekiah kept working with the task force until his condition forced him to stop. On his last day, he received a package with no return address. Inside was a single vial of clear liquid and a note, "The cure for what ails you." No strings attached. A gift from one predator to another in recognition of the game well played. "You caught us, but you'll never catch them all." The work continues. The count never ends. M.A. He turned the vial over to the FBI immediately. Analysis showed it to be a complex compound that might indeed repair neural damage, or might be poison, or might be nothing at all. The uncertainty was perfect, exquisite. A final move in a game Marcus was still playing from his cell. Hezekiah died 2 years later, his Parkinson's having progressed to complete incapacitation. He never took the vial's contents, never knew if it would have saved or damned him. At his funeral, Clementine spoke about his dedication to saving lives, his refusal to compromise his principles even when faced with death. But she kept one detail private. The night before he died, barely able to speak, Hezekiah had whispered to her, "Maybe they were right about one thing. Maybe I was selected for a reason. Maybe we're all predators or prey, and the only choice is which side of the emergency line we stand on." She chose to believe he was delirious from the medication. But sometimes, during her own night shifts, when strange calls came through about people who'd vanished, she wondered if the old dispatcher had understood something she didn't. The count never ends, it just passes to the next generation. And somewhere, a child with Marcus Ashcroft's eyes was growing up, carrying secrets in his blood that would surface one day. The families were scattered but not destroyed. The network was damaged but not dead. In dispatch centers across the country, operators still followed the Butterworth protocol, Never dismiss a strange call, never ignore a pattern. Always remember that the most unbelievable stories might be the truest ones. Because predators are patient. They evolve, they adapt, and they're always listening for the next emergency to exploit. 3 years after Hezekiah Butterworth's funeral, Detective Clementine Fairweather sat in her office reviewing cold cases when her phone rang. It was Janet from Dispatch, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Clem, we've got a situation. Remember the Butterworth protocol? I think we need to activate it." "What's the call?" "Young boy, maybe 7 or 8, called 911. Said his name is Theodore and he's being kept in a bad place. When I asked where, he said, where the trees used to remember things." Then the line went dead. Clementine was already reaching for her jacket. "Trace it." "That's the thing. It traced to the old Ashcroft property. But Clem, that whole area is a parking lot now. They built a shopping center there 2 years ago. The Ashcroft land had been sold to developers after the trials, the soil tested and cleared. Every trace of the family's dark legacy supposedly erased. But Clementine had learned that the Ashcroft family never did anything without layers of planning. She arrived at the shopping center at 9 p.m. The stores closing. Parking lot emptying. Nothing seemed unusual. A grocery store, a pharmacy, a few restaurants. But she'd brought ground-penetrating radar equipment, the same type they'd used to find the tunnels years ago. The readings were disturbing. Beneath the parking lot, beneath the new foundations, the old tunnel system still existed. The developers had simply built over it, sealed the entrances, and pretended it wasn't there. "We need a full tactical team," her partner, Detective Morrison, said. "If someone's down there—" No time. That boy could be Marcus's son. He'd be about 7 now. They found an access point through a maintenance tunnel in the shopping center's loading dock. The developers had walled off the connection, but the wall was recent concrete, different from the original structure. Someone had broken through and tried to repair it, but the patch job was amateur, rushed. The tunnels below were different from what the FBI had documented. Someone had been living here recently. Fresh air circulation, working lights jerry-rigged to the shopping center's power grid, and in what used to be Marcus's laboratory, a makeshift living space. Children's toys scattered on a mattress. Canned food stacked against the wall. Medical textbooks spread across a desk, annotated in 2 different hands, one neat and clinical, the other childish scrawl. "Jesus," Morrison whispered. "Someone's been raising a kid down here." They heard footsteps, fast and light. A boy appeared in the doorway, thin, pale, with Marcus Ashcroft's distinctive eyes. He looked at them without fear, more curious than scared. "Are you police?" he asked. "Mother said police would come eventually." "Theodore?" Clementine knelt to his level. "Is that your name?" "Theodore Marcus Ashcroft. I'm 7 3/4. Mother says I'm very advanced for my age. Where's your mother?" The boy pointed deeper into the tunnels. "She's with the subjects. She said if police came, I should show you everything. She wants you to understand." Against every protocol, Clementine followed the boy. He led them through passages that weren't on any map, past rooms that had been recently excavated. The infrastructure was impressive. Someone had spent years preparing this. They found her in what looked like a modern medical facility, far more advanced than what Marcus and Coldwell had built. A woman in her 30s, professional, calm, working on a patient who appeared to be sleeping peacefully on an examination table. She looked up when they entered, no surprise on her face. "Detective Fairweather, I've been expecting you for some time. My name is Dr. Susan Blackwood. I was Marcus Ashcroft's student, though never part of the official family network." Step away from the patient. He's sedated, not harmed. Stage 4, brain cancer. Weeks to live, according to conventional medicine, but with Marcus's protocols, modified with my improvements, he'll survive. I've already treated 12 terminal patients successfully. Would you like to see the documentation? She gestured to filing cabinets along the wall. Every patient volunteer. Every treatment consensual and documented. I'm not my mentor. I believe in the work, but not the methods. You're conducting illegal medical experiments in a tunnel. I'm saving lives that the medical establishment has written off. Mr. Harrison here, the man on the table, has 3 grandchildren. He'll see them graduate because of what I'm doing. Is that truly criminal? Morrison had his weapon drawn, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The patient on the table did look peaceful, monitors showing stable vitals. You've been raising Marcus's son down here, Clementine said, protecting him. The other families wanted him dead, loose end from the old network. Others wanted to indoctrinate him, continue the killing. I offered a third option. Raise him with the knowledge, but not the murders. Teach him the science without the slaughter. Theodore had moved to Susan's side, taking her hand. Mother saves people, he said proudly. She teaches me how bodies work, how to fix them when they break. Grandfather was wrong. We don't need to hurt people to help evolution. Marcus was brilliant but broken, Susan continued. His research could revolutionize medicine, but he wrapped it in murder and eugenics. I'm extracting the gold from the dross. These treatments work. The patients upstairs in the hospice, the ones everyone's given up on, I've saved 43 of them over 3 years. Upstairs? Morrison asked. Peaceful Endings Hospice. I'm the night physician. I identify candidates, offer them experimental treatment. Those who accept come here. Those who refuse die naturally, peacefully. No coercion, no kidnapping, just medicine practiced beyond the boundaries of current law. Clementine called for backup, but also for medical examiners, ethics specialists, judges. What they found in Susan's records complicated everything. Detailed consent forms. Video, testimonials from patients. Success rates that seemed impossible. 85% recovery rate for terminal cases. The legal battle that followed was unprecedented. Dr. Susan Blackwood was simultaneously charged with practicing medicine without proper licensing, child endangerment, and criminal trespassing, while being hailed by patient advocacy groups as a miracle worker. Her 43 saved patients testified on her behalf. Medical boards were split. Her methods were unorthodox and illegal, but they worked. Theodore was placed in protective custody while the courts decided his fate. He was indeed exceptionally intelligent, could recite medical textbooks, understood human anatomy better than most medical students. But he also drew pictures of normal things: superheroes, dinosaurs, spaceships. Susan had somehow raised him to be both heir to the Ashcroft medical knowledge and a relatively normal child. During Susan's trial, she revealed more about the network's history. She'd been a medical student when Marcus recruited her, brilliant but drowning in student loans. He'd offered to pay for her education in exchange for assistance with his research. I thought I was helping advance medicine, she testified. By the time I understood what Marcus really was, I was in too deep. But when he was arrested, when I learned about his son, I saw an opportunity for redemption. Take the knowledge, strip away the evil, use it properly. You still conducted illegal experiments, the prosecutor argued. I saved lives everyone else abandoned. Every patient knew the risks, made their choice. How is that worse than letting them die? The jury was deadlocked for weeks. Meanwhile, Theodore was evaluated by child psychologists. Their reports were disturbing, but not in the expected way. The boy showed no signs of psychopathy, no violent tendencies. He was empathetic, kind, genuinely wanted to help people. But his understanding of human biology was clinical, detached in a way that suggested he saw bodies as machines to be repaired rather than people to be saved. He's been programmed, one psychologist reported, but the programming might actually be beneficial. He has the knowledge to become an extraordinary physician, but also the emotional framework to use it ethically. It's as if Dr. Blackwood took the Ashcroft legacy and inverted it. The trial ended in a plea deal. Susan Blackwood would serve 5 years, but in a minimum security facility where she could continue her research under supervision. Her treatments would be studied, tested, potentially approved for wider use. Theodore would be placed with a carefully selected foster family, psychologists monitoring his development. But the story didn't end there. 6 months after the trial, Clementine received a package. Inside was Hezekiah's final journal, pages he'd written in his last days but never shared. The entries revealed something that changed everything. Day 1, 1847, matching the Ashcroft property number, Hezekiah had been counting too. Marcus was right about one thing. We're all selecting all the time. Every 9/11 call I chose to prioritize, every unit I dispatched first, I was deciding who lived and who might die. The allocation of emergency resources is its own form of selection. I just did it legally. But what if the selection could be more precise? What if we could identify future criminals before they acted, future victims before they suffered? The Ashcrofts perverted this idea, but the core concept, prediction, prevention, intervention, isn't inherently evil. I've been thinking about the boy, Theodore. If he grows up right, he could bridge both worlds. The Ashcroft medical knowledge combined with actual ethics. Maybe that's evolution too, not the strong surviving, but the smart learning from the monsters. The count doesn't end, it transforms. The final entry, barely legible from his trembling hands. Clementine, if you're reading this, know that I've been working with someone. Not Marcus, not the families, but another group. Doctors, researchers, ethicists who've been studying the Ashcroft research, trying to separate the medicine from the murder. Dr. Blackwood was one of them. We call ourselves the Hippocratic Collective. First, do no harm. We've been preparing for the day when the Ashcroft knowledge could be used properly. Theodore is the key. Protect him. Guide him. He could become what his grandfather never could, a true healer. The emergency isn't over, it's just beginning. But this time, we might actually be able to answer the call correctly. Clementine investigated quietly. The Hippocratic Collective was real. A shadow network of medical professionals who'd been tracking the Ashcroft research, preparing to utilize it ethically. They'd been the ones who helped Susan establish her underground clinic, provided her with supplies, vetted her patients. It was another conspiracy, but one aimed at healing rather than harm. Theodore, now in foster care with a doctor couple who were secretly part of the collective, thrived. His foster parents, Dr. James and Dr. Marie, were respected physicians who understood both his potential and his burden. They enrolled him in accelerated education programs, but also Little League baseball and art classes, normal child activities to balance the extraordinary knowledge he carried. Clementine visited him regularly, officially as part of ongoing monitoring, but really because she'd promised Hezekiah she'd watch over him. The boy remembered her from the tunnels, always asked about Dispatcher Butterworth, whom his mother had told him about. She said he was the one who listened when everyone else dismissed the calls, Theodore said once. That's what I want to do, listen to the emergencies others ignore. When Theodore turned 10, his biological father, Marcus Ashcroft, was executed. The boy asked to write him a letter before the execution, which the courts allowed under supervision. "Dear Father, I don't remember you, but I know your work. Mother taught me the medicine without the murder. I understand what you were trying to achieve, the perfection of humanity through selection and modification. But you were wrong about the method. Evolution isn't about removing the weak. It's about adapting, learning, improving together. The real selection isn't choosing who dies, but choosing who we help live. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to use your research to save people, all people, not just the ones deemed worthy. That's my selection, choosing healing over harm. The count ends with me. A new count begins, lives saved, not taken. Your son, biologically, Theodore Marcus, never responded, but those who witnessed his execution said he smiled when the letter was read to him. Not his usual calculating smile, but something that might have been pride. Dr. Susan Blackwood was released after 3 years, her sentence reduced for cooperation, and the successful implementation of her treatments in authorized trials. She was banned from practicing medicine traditionally, but allowed to work as a research consultant. The FDA fast-tracked several of her protocols. Within 5 years, her modifications to the Ashcroft research had saved thousands of lives. She was never allowed unsupervised contact with Theodore, but they corresponded through letters, all monitored. She taught him the advanced techniques through these letters, coded in medical terminology that appeared benign but contained deeper knowledge. The monitors knew but allowed it. The boy's potential was too valuable to waste. Detective Morrison, who'd been there that night in the tunnels, left law enforcement to study bioethics, specifically the question of using knowledge gained through evil means. His dissertation, The Ashcroft Paradox, When Monsters Create Miracles, became required reading in medical ethics courses. Clementine remained in law enforcement but specialized in a new type of crime: medical predators who use the Ashcroft name to justify their own experiments. Dozens of copycats emerged after the trials, claiming to be continuing the work. Most were frauds, but some had real knowledge, real danger. One night, 15 years after finding Theodore in the tunnels, Clementine received a call. It was him, now 22, about to graduate from medical school, the youngest in his class. "Detective Fairweather? I wanted you to know. I've been accepted to the residency program at Johns Hopkins, neurosurgery, with a focus on degenerative diseases, Parkinson's specifically." She understood the significance. Hezekiah's disease, the one Marcus claimed he could cure. "I've been working on the compound Marcus sent to Mr. Butterworth," Theodore continued. "It would have worked, but it also contained markers, genetic tags that would have allowed tracking, control. I've isolated the healing components, removed the control mechanisms. It's too late for him, but not for others." "Your father would have been proud," Clementine said, then caught herself. "I mean, I know who you meant." Hezekiah Butterworth was more of a father figure than Marcus ever could be, even though we never met. He chose to listen, to respond, to save rather than select. That's the legacy I follow. The call ended with a promise. Theodore would send her updates on his research, and she would continue watching for those who would misuse the Ashcroft knowledge. 5 years later, Dr. Theodore Ashcroft, he kept the name as a reminder, published his first paper, Ethical Applications of Morally Compromised Research, a framework for medical advancement. It outlined how to extract beneficial knowledge from unethical sources while maintaining moral integrity. The paper's dedication read, "To Dispatcher Hezekiah Butterworth, who taught me that the most important skill in medicine is knowing when to answer the call, and to Dr. Susan Blackwood, who showed me that monsters and choose to create healers instead of killers. The night the paper was published, dispatch centers across the country received a coordinated message through their emergency systems. Not a call, but a text that appeared on every screen simultaneously. The count has been reset. 0 victims. Counting lives saved instead. Thank you for listening. The Hippocratic Collective. The FBI investigated but found no source for the message. No hack, no breach, just words that appeared and disappeared, leaving only screenshots and confusion. Clementine, now nearing retirement herself, knew the truth. The collective had evolved, grown, become something beyond a simple network. They were the anti-Ashcrofts, using similar methods: coordination, secrecy, careful selection, but for healing instead of harm. She kept working, training new detectives in the Butterworth Protocol. But she also stayed in contact with Theodore, watched him become the physician he'd promised to be. He specialized in impossible cases, terminal patients everyone else had given up on. His success rate was extraordinary, his methods revolutionary but ethical, always consensual, always documented. One night, an old woman came to his clinic. She was dying, organs failing, beyond conventional help. But she had a story to tell first. "I'm Martha Henley," she said. "I was the records clerk in Millbrook County. I helped your friend Butterworth find the truth about your grandfather. I've been watching you, doctor. Watching you become what they never could. A true healer." She died peacefully 3 days later, but not before Theodore had recorded her complete oral history of the Ashcroft case, details that had never made it into official records, stories of other families they'd never caught, other networks still operating. "The work isn't done," she whispered at the end. "There are others out there, still counting victims. Find them, stop them, or better yet, convert them. Show them your way works better." Theodore took her words to heart. Using his unique position, the last of the Ashcroft line, keeper of their medical knowledge, he began reaching out to the remaining networks, not with force or law enforcement, but with an offer. Abandon the killing, embrace the healing, join the Hippocratic Collective. Some refused and were reported to authorities, but others, tired of running, tired of hating, accepted. The knowledge spread, evolved, transformed from tool of murder to instrument of medicine. The transformation wasn't perfect. Some techniques were too tainted to ever be ethical. Some practitioners couldn't abandon the old ways. But slowly, carefully, the Ashcroft legacy changed from one of death to one of life. Clementine retired on the 30th anniversary of the night she'd been attacked at the original Ashcroft property. At her retirement party, she received a video message from Theodore, now 40, head of neurosurgery at the Mayo Clinic. "Detective Fairweather, 30 years ago, you saved me from becoming what my genetics suggested I should be, a predator, a killer, a counter of victims. Instead, I became what Dispatcher Butterworth always believed was possible, someone who listens to the real emergency, the cry for help that comes from illness and suffering. The count stands at 3,847 lives saved using modified Ashcroft protocols. The number will only grow." The screen shifted to show a massive medical facility, state-of-the-art, built with funding from patients Theodore had saved. "This is the Butterworth Institute for Emergency Medicine. It opens next month. We'll train doctors in both conventional and Ashcroft-derived techniques, always ethical, always consensual." The inscription on the entrance reads, "Listen to every call, dismiss no voice, save who you can." Your friend's words, now carved in stone. The video ended with Theodore in his office, surrounded by medical texts, patient files, and a single framed photo, not of his biological father, but of Hezekiah Butterworth at his dispatch console, headset on, responding to an emergency. Clementine died 5 years later, peacefully, surrounded by family. Her last words, recorded by her daughter, were, "Tell Theodore the Count is good." Hezekiah would be proud. The Ashcroft name, once synonymous with murder, had become associated with revolutionary medical treatments. The Butterworth Protocol was standard training for emergency dispatchers worldwide, and somewhere, in facilities both official and secret, the Hippocratic Collective continued their work, taking the knowledge born from darkness and using it to bring light. The final entry in the official case file, written by Special Agent Patricia Reeves before her own retirement. The Ashcroft case represents the ultimate challenge in law enforcement and ethics. A family of serial killers whose research, born from murder and torture, has saved thousands of lives. A legacy of death transformed into a mission of healing. We stopped the killers, but their knowledge survives, evolved, redeemed in the hands of those who choose healing over harm. The count that began with victims has become a count of survivors. The emergency calls that once reported murders now report miracles. The dispatcher who started it all, Hezekiah Butterworth, proved that listening, truly listening, can change everything. Case status, closed legacy status, ongoing final count, 0 murders, infinite possibilities. But in the margins of the report, handwritten in pencil, someone had added, "The trees don't remember anymore." But we do, and we choose what to do with those memories. It was unsigned, but the handwriting matched Theodore Ashcroft's medical notes, precise, clinical, but somehow hopeful. The count, at last, had truly ended. A new count had begun. The Millbrook County Sheriff's Department building was old. Constructed in 1887, renovated countless times, each generation adding layers like sediment. Detective Cornelius Blackwood had worked there for 23 years, knew every creaking floorboard, every stubborn door, every corner where the morning light hit just right. But he'd never been to the sub-basement. Nobody went to the sub-basement. It wasn't officially restricted, just forgotten. The entrance was behind a rusted door marked Historical Archives, authorized personnel only in the basement proper, which itself was mostly used for evidence storage. The key had been lost decades ago, and nobody cared enough to cut the lock. Old files from the 1800s and early 1900s weren't exactly pressing police business. That changed on a humid Tuesday morning in August, when Mehitable Crowthorne, the night janitor, came to Cornelius's desk looking pale and shaken. Mehitable was 67, had been cleaning the station for 15 years, never missed a shift, never complained. She was grandmother to half the town, brought cookies every Friday, knew everyone's birthday. So when she stood at Cornelius's desk, wringing her hands, speaking barely above a whisper, he paid attention. "Detective Blackwood," she said, using his formal title despite years of insisting she call him Cornelius. "I need to show you something, in the basement." "What's wrong, Mehitable?" "I was cleaning last night, mopping the evidence room floor. The mop bucket tipped, water went everywhere. Some of it ran under that old door, the archive one. When I went to clean it up, I noticed the water coming back out was different." "Different how?" She pulled out a cloth from her cleaning supplies, still damp. It was stained rust red. "Blood?" Cornelius stood immediately. "That's what I thought." "But it's old blood, Detective, really old, mixed with the water, like something's been seeping." Cornelius followed her to the basement. Sure enough, beneath the archive door, a thin line of reddish water had dried on the concrete. The lock on the door was ancient, rusted solid. "Unforgettable, go upstairs. Don't mention this to anyone yet." She nodded, grateful to leave. Cornelius called Sergeant Philemon Goodbody, a bear of a man who'd been on the force for 30 years and knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. Phil, the old archive door in the basement. When was the last time anyone opened it? Philemon thought for a moment. Christ, Cornelius. Maybe 1987? There was some historical society woman wanting to research old cases, but she gave up when we couldn't find the key. Why? Just curious. Any idea what's actually down there? Files, I assume. Maybe furniture. The original building plans show a sub-basement that was used for cold storage before refrigeration. Why the sudden interest? Following up on something. I'll let you know if it's anything. Cornelius got bolt cutters from maintenance. The lock broke easily. Too easily, like it had been cut before and carefully positioned to look intact. The door swung open on hinges that should have screamed, but were recently oiled. The smell hit him first. Musty paper, mold, and underneath it, something organic and wrong. He flicked his flashlight into the darkness, found an old light switch. Amazingly, it worked. Bare bulbs flickered to life, revealing wooden stairs descending into shadows. The sub-basement was larger than expected. The main room held metal shelving units packed with file boxes, all labeled with dates ranging from 1887 to 1963. But it was the far wall that made Cornelius reach for his radio. Photographs. Hundreds of them, pinned to boards in neat rows. All black and white or sepia-toned. All showing the same thing. Dead bodies at crime scenes. But these weren't official police photographs. The angles were wrong. Artistic, almost. The focus was on the victims' faces, their expressions of final terror or surprise, and in the corner of each photo, barely visible, was the same mark. A small symbol that looked like a tree with 13 branches. Dispatch, this is Detective Blackwood. I need CSI in the basement. Full team, and nobody else comes down here. While waiting for the crime scene unit, Cornelius examined the photos more carefully. The dates on the backs ranged from 1891 to 1962. Different handwriting for different eras, but all contained the same information: name, date, location, and a number. Sarah Mills, March 3, 1891, River Road, Hornt James Hartford, June 15, 1894, Municipal Park, Sioux, Margaret Cooper, October 31, 1897, train station 3. The numbers went up sequentially. The last photo was numbered 273. 273 victims over 71 years, all documented in this hidden room beneath the police station. CSI arrived, led by Jennifer Walsh, who'd worked major crimes for 15 years and thought she'd seen everything. Jesus, Cornelius, what is this? I think we just found evidence of a serial killer who operated for 7 decades. Maybe multiple killers, a succession. Look at the organizational system. This isn't random. This is methodical. They processed the scene carefully. No fingerprints on the photos. Whoever had been here wore gloves. But there were other traces. Hair fibers. Modern ones. Someone had been here recently, within the last few weeks. Behind the photo boards, they found something worse. Journals. Dozens of them, each filled with detailed accounts of the murders. Not confessions exactly, more like reports. Clinical, detached, professional. March 3, 1891. Subject, Sarah Mills, 19, prostitute. Method, strangulation with piano wire. Location selected for symbolic value, where she first sold herself. Death occurred at 11:47 p.m. No witnesses. Body position to suggest suicide. Investigation concluded as expected. Signed, The Watcher. The same signature appeared in every entry, though the handwriting changed over the decades. Different watchers, same mission. Cornelius called Sheriff Patricia Hammond directly. "Pat, we need to seal the building. Nobody in or out until we know what we're dealing with." "What did you find?" "Evidence of serial murders going back to the founding of this department." "Pat, the killer had access to the station. They might have been cops." The lockdown was immediate. Every officer, every staff member, everyone who'd had access to the building was now a potential suspect or witness. The FBI was called within hours. Agent David Curtis arrived that evening with a team of federal investigators. He was young for a senior agent, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Detective Blackwood, walk me through the discovery." Cornelius explained about Unforgettable, the water, the photos. Curtis listened without interrupting, then said something that chilled Cornelius to the bone. "We've seen this before. Chicago, 1998, Boston, 2003, Philadelphia, 2009. Always in old police stations, always in forgotten basements, always the same symbol, the same methodology. We've been tracking this for years." "Serial killers copying each other?" "No. We think it's an organization. Cops killing people and documenting it, passing the tradition down through generations. They call themselves the Watchers. They believe they're maintaining order by removing undesirable elements from society." "Vigilante cops?" "Worse. They're not targeting criminals. Look at your victims. Prostitutes, immigrants, homosexuals, the mentally ill, homeless, people who wouldn't be missed, whose deaths wouldn't be investigated thoroughly. They're conducting social cleansing and using their positions to cover it up." Cornelius thought about every cold case he'd worked, every unsolved murder that had been quietly filed away. How many were victims of the Watchers? That night, they began cross-referencing the photos with old case files. Many of the deaths had been ruled suicides or accidents. The investigations had been perfunctory, signed off by officers whose names appeared repeatedly. Officer Thomas Ashford, 1891-1923, Detective Michael Brennan, 1923-1955, Sergeant Paul Morrison, 1955-1987, Lieutenant James Crawford, 1987-2019. "Crawford," Cornelius said. "He retired just 3 years ago, lives outside town. He was my training officer when I joined the force." Curtis nodded grimly. "We need to bring him in, quietly. If there are active watchers in the department, we can't tip them off." They picked up Crawford at his home at dawn. He didn't resist, didn't seem surprised, just smiled sadly and said, "I wondered when you'd find it. I told them we should have destroyed everything, but tradition is tradition." In interrogation, Crawford was forthcoming, almost eager to talk. It started with the first sheriff, Abraham Millbrook, the town's founder. He believed in keeping the community pure. Back then, it meant something different than now, but the principle remained. Each generation of Watchers selected their targets based on the social standards of their time. "You're confessing to murder?" "I'm confessing to maintaining order. Do you know what this town was like in the 60s? Crime everywhere, drugs pouring in, decent people afraid to leave their homes. We cleaned it up. Not through arrests. The courts were too lenient. Through removal." "How many did you kill?" "Personally, 17, but I was selective, careful. Some of the others were enthusiastic. That's why I tried to end it when I retired, but traditions don't die easily." "Who's the current Watcher?" Crawford's smile faded. "I don't know. They cut me out when I objected to their methods. The new generation, they're different. Less discriminating. They've expanded the criteria for undesirable. Anyone who threatens the status quo, anyone who asks too many questions." "Like Unforgettable finding the room?" Crawford's face went pale. "Unforgettable Crowthorne, she found it. You need to protect her. Now. If they know she's the one who exposed them." Cornelius was already reaching for his phone when it rang. It was dispatch. "Detective, we have a situation. Mehitable Crowthorne didn't show up for her shift. Her neighbor called. Her door's open, lights on, but she's not there." They found Mehitable's body in her apartment 2 hours later, staged to look like a heart attack, but Curtis's team found the injection site quickly. Succinylcholine, a paralytic that would cause respiratory failure. The same drug found at several of the other Watcher scenes in different cities. The killer had left something else. A photo of Mehitable, black and white despite being taken with a modern camera, with the tree symbol in the corner and the number 274 written on the back. The Watcher was still active. And now they knew they'd been discovered. That afternoon, Cornelius received an anonymous text. "Stop looking or you're 275. He showed it to Curtis, who immediately put him in protective custody, but Cornelius refused to hide. "They're in my department. My colleagues, people I've trusted with my life, I'm not running." Curtis admired his courage, but insisted on surveillance. They bugged Cornelius's office, his car, his home. If the Watcher made contact, they'd know. That night, alone in his apartment with federal agents watching from across the street, Cornelius received a visitor. Not the Watcher, but someone unexpected. Sergeant Philemon Goodbody, his old friend, looking haggard and frightened. "Cornelius, we need to talk, but not here. They're listening." "Phil, if you know something, I know everything. I've known for years, but I'm not one of them. I've been documenting them, gathering evidence. I have names, dates, everything. But we need to move now. They're planning something big." "What kind of something?" "They know the FBI is here. They know the investigation is closing in. They're going to clean house, destroy all evidence, eliminate all witnesses, including you, me, and anyone else who might talk." "How many are there?" "In this department, at least 5, but nationwide, hundreds. This is bigger than you know, Cornelius. The Watchers aren't just in Millbrook, they're in every major city. Coordinated, organized, and tomorrow night they're having an emergency meeting to decide whether to go underground or fight back." "Where?" "Where it all started, the old Millbrook property, the original sheriff's house. It's been abandoned for decades, but they maintain it as a kind of shrine." Cornelius made a decision that would change everything. He activated the wire he was wearing, knowing Curtis would hear everything. "Phil, I need you to get me into that meeting." Agent Curtis's voice crackled through Cornelius's earpiece within seconds. "Negative. Absolutely not. We'll raid the meeting with full tactical support." Cornelius muted his wire and looked at Philemon. "The FBI wants to raid it." "Then everyone dies," Philemon said flatly. "The Watchers have protocols. First sign of law enforcement, they scatter and activate elimination procedures. Every witness, every loose end, gone within hours. I've seen it happen in Baltimore when they got too close in 2015. 17 people died in accidents over 3 days. Cornelius unmuted his wire. "Curtis, Sergeant Goodbody says a raid will trigger a massacre. We need to do this smart." "I'm listening." Philemon pulled out a worn notebook, pages filled with cramped handwriting. "I've been tracking them for 15 years, ever since I stumbled onto evidence of their activities. I was too scared to come forward. They have people everywhere, even in the FBI. But I've documented everything." He opened to a page with names, positions, dates. The list was extensive, horrifying. Judges, prosecutors, medical examiners, city officials. The Watchers had infiltrated every level of law enforcement and justice. "The current leader in Millbrook is someone called the Arbiter," Philemon continued. "They coordinate activities, select targets, assign executioners. I don't know their real identity, but they're high-ranking, someone with access to all department resources. "Why haven't they killed you?" Cornelius asked. "Because I've been useful. I redirect investigations when they get too close, destroy evidence when necessary. I became complicit to survive. But Mehitable, she was innocent. A grandmother. That's too far, even for them." Curtis's voice came through the wire. "We need that notebook. And we need you both at the meeting, recording everything." The next 36 hours were spent in meticulous preparation. Curtis's team created false identities and alibis, making it appear that Cornelius had fled town in fear while actually keeping him under constant surveillance. Philemon continued his normal routine, giving no indication he'd turned. They fitted Cornelius with state-of-the-art recording equipment, microscopic cameras and microphones woven into his clothing, undetectable even to professional sweeps. Philemon would introduce him to the meeting as a potential recruit, someone who'd shown proper thinking in his case files. The old Millbrook property sat on 40 acres outside town, the original homestead from the 1850s. The house was supposedly condemned, but Philemon explained the watchers maintained it meticulously inside while keeping the exterior deliberately decrepit. They arrived at 11 p.m. on Thursday night. Cars were already there, parked behind the house where they couldn't be seen from the road. Cornelius counted 12 vehicles, more than expected. "Emergency meeting," Philemon explained. "Members from other chapters. This is bigger than just Millbrook's exposure." The front door opened before they knocked. A woman Cornelius recognized, Assistant District Attorney Helen Morrison, stood there in dark clothing, a pistol visible in her shoulder holster. "Philemon and Detective Blackwood." Her voice was cold. "Unexpected. The arbiter requested his presence," Philemon said smoothly. "Given current circumstances, we need to know where everyone stands." Helen studied Cornelius for a long moment, then stepped aside. There in the parlor. The interior was indeed immaculate. Restored Victorian furniture, oil paintings of stern-faced men Cornelius now recognized as previous watchers, and in the center of the main room, a table where 14 people sat. Cornelius knew half of them, fellow officers, city officials, people he'd worked with for years. At the head of the table sat Chief of Police Margaret Brennan. Cornelius's shock must have shown because she smiled coldly. "Surprised, Detective? You shouldn't be. Who better to coordinate our activities than someone who controls assignments, evidence, and investigations? Chief Brennan, you're the arbiter. I prefer to think of myself as a guardian. Sit, we have much to discuss." Cornelius took the offered chair, hyper-aware of the cameras recording everything. Around him, faces he'd trusted watched him with predatory interest. "The FBI investigation," Brennan began, "is problematic but manageable. Agent Curtis is thorough but unimaginative. He's looking for a serial killer, not understanding he's found an institution. We've survived federal scrutiny before. By killing witnesses like Mehitable," Cornelius said. "Mehitable was unfortunate," Brennan admitted, "but necessary. She would have talked, and her testimony would have led to deeper questions. We couldn't risk it. She was innocent. No one is innocent, Detective. She was old, contributing nothing, taking resources. Her removal was simply accelerating the inevitable." A man Cornelius didn't recognize spoke up, thin, scholarly, with dead eyes. "The question isn't past actions, but future ones. Our exposure in Millbrook compromises the entire network. We need to consider Protocol 9. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Philemon had mentioned Protocol 9 in his notes. Complete sanitization. Every watcher would eliminate their assigned targets, destroy all evidence, and disappear. Dozens, possibly hundreds, would die. That's premature, argued Captain Ronald Hayes from the state police. We can contain this. Blame it on Crawford. Say he acted alone. He's already confessed. Crawford's confession implicates the institution, Brennan countered. No, we need a different solution. Which brings us to Detective Blackwood. All eyes turned to Cornelius. You have a choice, Brennan continued. Join us formally, help us navigate this investigation and prosper. Or refuse and become victim 275. But understand, your death won't be quick like Mehitable's. We need you to disappear completely, along with all evidence of your investigation. You're asking me to betray my oath. We're asking you to understand your oath properly. Protect and serve doesn't mean protecting everyone. Some elements of society are cancerous. We excise them. We've kept crime rates low, maintained order, preserved property values. The price is a few undesirables, removed quietly. Murdered, cleaned, corrected the scholarly man. I'm Dr. Simon Ashford, by the way. I handle the medical aspects, making deaths appear natural. I've refined my predecessor's techniques considerably. Untraceable compounds, perfect mimicry of natural causes. Art, really. Cornelius felt sick but forced himself to remain calm. How many active watchers are there? In this room? Everyone in Millbrook, 23, nationwide, that would be telling. But sufficient to say we're not some small conspiracy. We're an institution parallel to official law enforcement. We do what the courts can't or won't. Show him the records, suggested Helen Morrison. Let him understand the scope. Brennan nodded to Dr. Ashford, who produced a tablet. On it were detailed files, thousands of them. Victims going back not just decades but over a century, across every major city in America. The organization was vast, interconnected, with its own hierarchy, rules, even a pension system for retired members. My God, Cornelius breathed, knowing Curtis was seeing this through his cameras. God has nothing to do with it, Brennan said. We're pragmatists. Society produces waste. We dispose of it. Simple. What about cops who refuse? Who threaten to expose you? They have accidents, said Officer Dennis Murphy, someone Cornelius had considered a friend. Remember Detective Santos from 2018? Drove off a cliff, supposedly drunk? He'd found some old evidence, started asking questions. We couldn't risk it. You killed Santos. I did, Murphy said without emotion. Quick, painless, more than he would have given us if he'd talked. The room fell silent. Then Brennan stood. Enough discussion. Detective Blackwood, your decision. Join us or die. You have 60 seconds. Cornelius stood as well, knowing Curtis's team was mobilizing but needing to buy time. If I join, what exactly would I be doing? Initially, helping us mislead the FBI investigation. Later, you'd be assigned targets, people whose removal benefits society, addicts, dealers, pedophiles who slip through legal cracks. You'd be doing good work, just through unconventional means. And if the FBI gets too close despite my help, then we implement Protocol 9. But with you inside their investigation, that becomes unlikely. 30 seconds, Dr. Ashford announced, checking his watch. Cornelius made a decision. I need to know more, the full structure. Who's at the top? This can't just be independent cells. Brennan smiled. Clever. You're right. There's a national council, 5 members, each controlling a region. I report to the Eastern Controller. Above them, well, that's need to know. 10 seconds. Wait, Philemon suddenly said. He can't decide without seeing the shrine. Brennan frowned. The shrine is for confirmed members only. He needs to understand our history, our purpose. How else can he truly commit? After a moment's consideration, Brennan nodded. Fine. But if he refuses after seeing it, he dies here. They led him to the basement. Unlike the sub-basement at the station, this one was accessed through a modern security door with biometric locks. Brennan pressed her palm to the scanner, and heavy bolts disengaged. The room beyond was part museum, part chapel. The walls were lined with photographs. Not just victims, but watchers throughout history. Police officers, sheriffs, federal agents, all part of the network. In the center was a glass case containing what looked like a journal. The original charter, Brennan explained. Written by Abraham Millbrook himself in 1851. He founded this town as a utopia, a place where undesirable elements would be quietly removed. Every sheriff, every chief since has been a watcher. It's not corruption, it's tradition. Cornelius approached the case, saw the yellowed pages covered in faded ink. The cameras in his clothes were capturing everything. The charter detailed the organization's structure, its methods, its philosophy. It was a blueprint for systematic murder disguised as civic duty. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Ashford said. 170 years of continuous operation. We're older than the FBI, older than most federal agencies. We are American law enforcement. Just the honest part that admits some people need killing. That's when Cornelius heard it. Helicopters in the distance getting closer. Brennan heard it too. Her face went cold. You're wearing a wire. Before anyone could move, the lights went out. Curtis's team had cut the power. In the darkness, chaos erupted. Gunshots, screaming, the crash of breaking glass. Cornelius dropped to the floor, crawling toward what he hoped was a wall. His earpiece crackled with Curtis's voice. Stay down, we're breaching now. Flashbang grenades detonated upstairs, the sound deafening even in the basement. Someone fell beside Cornelius, Dr. Ashford, clutching his chest, gasping. Not shot, a heart attack from the shock. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Cornelius saw Brennan moving toward a wall panel, reaching for something. He tackled her before she could reach it, both of them crashing into the glass case. The original charter scattered across the floor, pages separating. Protocol 9, Brennan screamed. Activate Protocol 9, but it was too late. FBI agents flooded the basement, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The watchers were trapped, caught in their own shrine. The arrests took hours. 14 watchers in the house, all taken alive except Dr. Ashford, who died en route to the hospital. The evidence in the shrine was overwhelming. Names, dates, methods, the entire structure of the organization laid out in meticulous detail. But as they led Brennan away, she leaned close to Cornelius and whispered, "You think you've won? We're ideological, not organizational. Cut off the head, the body keeps moving. Every watcher you didn't catch tonight is burning evidence, destroying connections. You got Millbrook's cell, nothing more." The investigation that followed proved her partially right. While they'd captured the Millbrook watchers and seized crucial evidence, attempts to trace the network nationally met with limited success. Files had been destroyed, contacts had vanished, and potential witnesses had sudden accidents or simply disappeared. Curtis's team identified approximately 40 more watchers nationwide, but hundreds more were suspected. The organization had prepared for this possibility, with contingency plans that included dead switches. If certain members didn't check in regularly, evidence caches would be destroyed automatically. 3 weeks into the investigation, Cornelius received a package at his home. Inside was a photo of himself, taken from a distance, with the number 275 written on the back. But below that was a new message: postponed, not canceled. The FBI put him in witness protection, but Cornelius refused to leave Millbrook. His town, his responsibility. He worked with federal agents to rebuild the police department, screening every officer, reviewing every cold case from the past century. They found evidence of 347 murders committed by Millbrook watchers over 170 years. Most victims were exactly as Brennan had described: society's marginalized, people whose deaths were barely investigated. But mixed among them were threats to the organization: journalists who'd asked too many questions, officers who'd refused to join, citizens who'd witnessed too much. During Brennan's interrogation, she remained unrepentant. "Every society has people who handle the unpleasant necessities," she said. "Soldiers kill enemies, doctors let terminal patients die, judges condemn criminals. We just streamlined the process, removed the bureaucracy and hypocrisy. You murdered innocent people. Define innocent. The prostitute spreading disease? The addict robbing homes? The mentally ill person who'll eventually snap and hurt someone? We prevented future crimes by removing current problems. That's not justice. No, it's efficiency. Justice is slow, expensive, often fails. We never failed." She was convicted on 17 counts of murder, all they could directly prove, and sentenced to death. But during the trial, something disturbing emerged. 3 jurors reported being approached by strangers who suggested acquittal might be healthier. 2 prosecutors' homes were broken into, nothing stolen but message clear. The judge received photos of his grandchildren at school. The watchers still had reach. Philemon Goodbody became the key witness, his notebook providing crucial evidence. But the guilt of his complicity, even under duress, broke him. 3 months after the trial, he was found dead in his apartment. Suicide, the coroner ruled, though Cornelius had his doubts. The scene was too clean, too organized, classic watcher methodology. A year later, Curtis called Cornelius with disturbing news. "We've found similar organizations in 12 other countries. Same structure, same methods, same philosophy. They communicate, share techniques, sometimes trade targets. This isn't just American, it's global. How do we fight something that big? We don't. We contain it, prosecute what we can, and hope exposing them limits their operations. But Cornelius, they're not gone. They're adapting, evolving. The next generation will be harder to catch." Curtis was right. Over the following years, mysterious deaths continued, but with no pattern, no connection to prove organizational involvement. The watchers had learned from Millbrook's exposure. They'd become ghosts, invisible predators hiding behind badges and suits. Cornelius continued working, now as chief of the reformed Millbrook Police Department. He instituted new protocols, mandatory psychological evaluations, rotation of assignments to prevent entrenchment, civilian oversight of all death investigations. But late at night, reviewing case files, he wondered how many watchers were still out there, still selecting targets, still killing. 5 years after the raid, he received another package. Inside was a single photo, Mehitable Crowthorne's grave, fresh flowers placed on it. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, "We remember our mistakes. We learn. We continue." The new watchers. The investigation had destroyed the old network, but something new was forming. Smarter, more careful, having learned from their predecessors' mistakes. Cornelius knew, with cold certainty, that the war wasn't over. It had just become invisible. The station's sub-basement was sealed permanently, filled with concrete. But sometimes, late at night, officers reported strange sounds from below, like footsteps or voices, or the click of a camera shutter. Urban legend, most likely. The building settling. But Cornelius knew better. The watchers hadn't started in that basement, and they hadn't ended there either. They were still watching, still selecting, still removing those they deemed unworthy. And somewhere, perhaps in another police station, another basement, another shrine was being built. New photographs being mounted. New numbers being assigned. The count continuing, invisible and inexorable. Justice perverted into something monstrous, yet convinced of its own righteousness. 7 years had passed since the Millbrook Watchers trial. Detective Cornelius Blackwood, now 58 with gray threading through his hair, had risen to police chief through necessity rather than ambition. The department needed someone untainted by the Watchers, someone who'd expose them rather than enabled them. But the weight of that responsibility pressed on him every day. The morning of September the 15th started like any other, until Officer Rachel Winters knocked on his door. She was young, 25, hired as part of the post-watcher recruitment drive. A clean background, stellar academy records, no connections to the old network. "Chief, we have a situation." A body was found at the old Brennan property. Margaret Brennan had been executed 3 years prior, her house standing empty since. Her children wanted nothing to do with it. The real estate market wanted nothing to do with it. Murder houses were hard sells, especially when the murderer was the town's former police chief. "Homicide?" Cornelius asked. "That's the thing, sir." "The victim?" "It's James Crawford, the one who confessed to being a watcher back in 2016. Cornelius stood immediately. Crawford had been serving life in federal prison, no possibility of parole. "That's impossible. He's in maximum security." "Not anymore. The body's been positively identified. Fingerprints, dental records, even a distinctive scar from an old gunshot wound. It's definitely him. The crime scene was meticulously staged. Crawford's body sat in Brennan's old study, positioned at her desk, wearing a police uniform from the 1980s. On the desk was a manual typewriter, the same model found in the station's sub-basement years ago, with a single page loaded into it. The typed message read, "The old ways failed because they were too rigid. The new ways will succeed because they adapt. This is both an ending and a beginning." The count resumes. Beneath the typewriter was a photograph. Cornelius at his desk, taken through his office window with a telephoto lens. The number on the back, 275. "How did Crawford get out of federal prison?" Cornelius asked the FBI liaison, Agent Sarah Mitchell, who'd replaced Curtis after his retirement. "He didn't," Mitchell replied, reviewing her tablet. "According to the Bureau of Prisons, Crawford is still in his cell. Has been all week. Guards saw him at count this morning." "Then who's—" "We're checking now." The answer came 2 hours later and changed everything. The man in federal prison wasn't James Crawford. DNA testing revealed him to be Harold Morse, a homeless veteran who disappeared from Millbrook in 2016, around the time of Crawford's arrest. "Someone switched them," Mitchell said, disbelief in her voice. "Probably during transport between facilities. Crawford's been free for years." The implications were staggering. If the Watchers could infiltrate federal prison transport, swap prisoners, maintain the deception for years, their reach was far greater than anyone had imagined. Forensics determined Crawford had been dead for approximately 48 hours. Cause of death: injection of succinylcholine, the Watchers' signature drug. He'd been murdered by his own organization. "Why kill one of their own?" Officer Winters asked during the briefing. "Punishment," Cornelius suggested. "Crawford confessed, gave us information. Maybe this is their justice." But Mitchell had a different theory. Or he knew too much about the new structure. Look at the message. Old ways failed. Crawford was old guard. Maybe he opposed whatever they're planning. That afternoon, Cornelius received a call on his personal cell from an unknown number. Against protocol, he answered. Detective Blackwood. The voice was electronically distorted but clear. Or, should I say, Chief Blackwood. Congratulations on the promotion. You've done well with our old department. Who is this? Someone who's been watching you for 7 years. Studying your methods, your patterns, your weaknesses. You exposed the old watchers admirably. But did you really think that would end us? You're the new leadership. I'm evolution, Chief. The old watchers were blunt instruments. Murder, intimidation, fear. Effective, but ultimately unsustainable. We've learned from their mistakes. So you're still killing people? Oh no, Chief. We're doing something far more sophisticated. Murder leaves bodies, evidence, investigations. We've moved beyond such crudity. Then what? Check your missing persons files for the last 5 years. Specifically, look for patterns in the types who disappear. Then ask yourself, where do they go? The line went dead. Cornelius immediately pulled the missing persons database. In the past 5 years, Millbrook had seen a 300% increase in disappearances. But looking closer, there was indeed a pattern. The missing were all people who fit the old watcher victim profile: homeless, addicts, sex workers, undocumented immigrants. But unlike the old watcher's victims, these people weren't found dead. They simply vanished. Mitchell assembled a task force that afternoon. 12 agents, forensic specialists, data analysts. They set up in the conference room that had once been Brennan's office, now stripped of all her memorabilia, but still carrying the weight of her presence. Nationwide, we're seeing similar patterns, Mitchell reported. Cities that had confirmed watcher cells all show increased disappearances of marginalized individuals. No bodies, no evidence, just gone. Human trafficking? Suggested Agent Dennis Park. Possible. But trafficking operations leave traces. Transportation records, financial transactions, survivor accounts. This is different. Cleaner, Cornelius thought about the caller's words. What if they're not killing them? What if they're taking them somewhere? For what purpose? Before he could answer, Officer Winters burst in. Chief, we have another situation. The old Millbrook property. Someone's there. The property where the Watchers had held their final meeting 7 years ago was supposed to be demolished, but legal challenges from historical preservationists had kept it standing. Security cameras had been installed after the raid, motion sensors, the works. The footage showed a single figure entering through the front door at 3 a.m., staying for exactly 47 minutes, then leaving. The face was obscured by a hood, but the build was familiar. The walk was familiar. Enhance the image, Cornelius ordered. When the tech specialist zoomed in, they could see the figure's hand as it reached for the door. On the ring finger was a distinctive scar, a burn mark in the shape of a cross. Cornelius knew that scar. He'd seen it countless times over 20 years. That's Philemon Goodbody. Everyone in the room froze. Philemon had been dead for 6 years, suicide after testifying against the Watchers. Cornelius had attended his funeral, had seen the body in the casket. Run facial recognition, Mitchell ordered. The results were immediate and impossible. 94% match for Philemon Goodbody. Either someone with extensive plastic surgery, Mitchell said slowly, or Philemon faked his death. They raided the Millbrook property within the hour. The house was empty, but in the basement shrine room they found new additions. Photographs on the wall, but not of victims. These showed people alive, working, living in what looked like a massive underground facility. Each photo was labeled with a name and date. All were people from the missing persons files. At the center of the display was a map of the United States with 17 locations marked. Each mark had a number: 50, 75, 120, up to 500. Population counts, Mitchell breathed. They're not killing them. They're collecting them. A laptop sat open on the table. Video paused on the screen. Cornelius hit play. Philemon Goodbody appeared, very much alive, older but unmistakable. He sat in what looked like a modern office, walls white and sterile. "Hello, Cornelius. If you're watching this, you've found our breadcrumbs. Good. We want you to understand what we've become." The camera panned, showing a vast underground space, like a small city. Buildings, streets, people walking around in uniform gray clothing. The old watchers were right about one thing. Some people are burdens on society, but killing them was wasteful. We've found a better solution. We take them, yes, but we reform them, educate them, give them purpose. The camera showed workshops, classrooms, medical facilities. The missing people were there, working, seemingly content. This is Sanctuary 1, located beneath the Nevada desert. Population, 537. Former addicts, criminals, homeless, all given new lives, new identities, new purposes. They work for us now, maintaining our facilities, growing our food, building our infrastructure. Cornelius felt sick. "It's slavery," Philemon continued. "They can't leave, true, but they have food, shelter, medical care, purpose, more than they had above ground. We're not monsters, Cornelius, we're pragmatists. Society produces excess population it can't support. We repurpose that excess." "The government would never," Mitchell started. "The government doesn't know," Philemon said, as if responding to her. "We're entirely self-sufficient. Geothermal power, underground water sources, hydroponic farms. We've been building for 20 years, using resources diverted from various federal programs by well-placed members." The video showed more footage. People working in factories, children in classrooms, families in small apartments. It looked almost normal, except for the armed guards, the lack of windows, the cameras everywhere. "Each sanctuary operates independently," Philemon explained. "If one is discovered, the others continue. We learned from the old Watchers' centralized structure. Decentralization ensures survival. This is where evolution leads, Cornelius. Not murder, but management. Not elimination, but utilization. The new Watchers don't kill societies unwanted. We absorb them, transform them, make them useful." The video shifted to show a medical facility. Doctors working on patients, all wearing the same gray uniforms. Some volunteer for medical trials. Experimental treatments for diseases that would take decades to approve above ground. Their sacrifice. Voluntary, I assure you, advances human knowledge. Already, we've developed treatments for early-stage Alzheimer's, certain cancers, autoimmune conditions. When perfected, these treatments will be discovered by legitimate researchers above ground. Humanity benefits, and the test subjects find purpose in their contribution. "Monster," Cornelius muttered. "The real monsters," Philemon said, "are those who let people die on streets, in alleys, from preventable diseases and circumstances. We give them lives worth living, even if confined. Judge us when you've seen the alternative." The video ended with coordinates: 36.1699 degrees north, 115.1398 degrees west. "That's just outside Las Vegas," Agent Park said. "Federal land designated as a nuclear test site from the 1950s. Nobody goes there." "Perfect cover," Mitchell said. "Underground facilities could be explained as old test bunkers." Radiation warnings keep civilians away. We're going in, Cornelius said. With what authority? That's federal land, military jurisdiction. We'd need evidence, warrants, cooperation from agencies that might be infiltrated. She was right. The new Watchers had learned from their predecessors' mistakes. They'd made themselves nearly untouchable legally. That night, Cornelius couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those photos, those people underground. Were they prisoners or willing participants? Did it matter if their alternative was death on the streets? His phone rang at 3 a.m. Philemon's voice, no longer on video but live. Struggling with the ethics, old friend? You're not my friend. Friends don't fake their deaths. I had to disappear. The guilt of testifying, even though I knew the old Watchers were wrong, was killing me. But then the new leadership approached me, showed me a better way. I've saved more lives in the last 6 years than I ever did as a cop. You've enslaved them. I've employed them. Every person in our sanctuaries has a job, a purpose, dignity. Yes, they can't leave. But Cornelius, be honest. What life were they going back to? Addiction? Homelessness? Death? That's not your choice to make, isn't it? Society already made the choice by abandoning them. We're just providing an alternative to inevitable death. Why show us this? Why reveal yourselves? Because we need legitimacy. Eventually, the sanctuaries will be discovered. When that happens, we want allies who understand our purpose. You could be one of those allies. Never. Then you're 275, Cornelius, but not killed, taken. You'll see our sanctuaries from the inside. Experience what we offer. Maybe your perspective will change. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The old Watchers would have killed you years ago. We're offering you a chance to understand, to evolve with us. Think about it. The call ended. Cornelius immediately called Mitchell, but her phone went to voicemail. He tried the FBI field office, no answer. His heart racing, he drove to Mitchell's hotel. Her room was empty, bed unslept in, but on the pillow was a note. She's safe. Experiencing Sanctuary 2. Will be returned in 72 hours with full knowledge of our operations. The new Watchers. The manhunt was immediate but futile. Mitchell had vanished as completely as the hundreds of others. Roadblocks, helicopter searches, satellite surveillance, nothing. The new Watchers had infiltrated so deeply that they could take an FBI agent without leaving a trace. For 3 days, Cornelius coordinated the search while knowing it was useless. The Watchers had made their point. They could take anyone, anytime. On the morning of the 4th day, Mitchell reappeared in her hotel room, unconscious but unharmed. When she woke, her story chilled everyone who heard it. She'd been taken to an underground facility, not in Nevada but beneath Chicago. Population, over 1,000. Former homeless, addicts, criminals, all living in a structured society, working, learning, contributing. The worst part, she told Cornelius privately, is that most of them seemed grateful. Happy, even. They had lives down there, families, jobs, purpose. When I told some they could leave with me, they refused. Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe. Or maybe they really did prefer it to their previous lives. Cornelius, what if the Watchers are right? What if this is better than letting people die on the streets? Freedom matters, Cornelius said firmly. Choice matters. Does it? When the choice is between slow death above ground or structured life below. She showed him something she'd hidden from the official debriefing. A flash drive given to her by one of the sanctuary administrators. They wanted you to see this, she said. The drive contained thousands of files. medical records showing treatments developed in the sanctuaries, agricultural innovations from their hydroponic farms, educational programs that had turned illiterate adults into skilled workers, and testimonials, hundreds of them, from sanctuary residents describing their lives before and after. One video stood out. A woman, maybe 40, speaking directly to the camera. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. Above ground, I was a heroin addict, prostitute, 3-time felon. I was dying, literally dying when they took me. That was 4 years ago. Now, I'm clean. I work in the medical facility as a nurse's aide. I have an apartment, friends, dignity. Yes, I can't leave. But where would I go? Back to the streets, back to the needle. This isn't prison, it's salvation." Cornelius turned it off. "It's still wrong." "Is it?" Mitchell asked. "Or is it just different from what we accept as right?" The investigation stalled. Without concrete evidence of crimes, the people were missing, not murdered, and with the sanctuaries on federal land requiring military cooperation to access, they were stuck. Meanwhile, more people disappeared. The homeless camps emptied. Drug corners went quiet. The missing persons files grew thick. Public opinion was divided. Some called the new watchers kidnappers, slavers, criminals. Others, particularly those who'd lost family members to addiction or violence, quietly wondered if maybe, just maybe, forced rehabilitation wasn't the worst fate. Cornelius received regular packages, photos of him, always numbered 275, reminders that he could be taken at any time, but also reports from the sanctuaries, medical breakthroughs, agricultural innovations, sociological studies on rehabilitation and purpose. The new watchers were building a parallel society, hidden but thriving, and they were getting bolder. 1 year after Crawford's body was discovered, billboards appeared overnight in 17 cities. Every person deserves purpose. Every life has value. Some just need help finding it. The sanctuaries. By morning, the billboards were gone, but the message had been sent. The new watchers weren't hiding anymore. They were recruiting, normalizing, preparing for the day when their underground cities would be revealed and, they hoped, accepted. Cornelius stood in his office, looking at the map Mitchell had recovered, the 17 sanctuary locations. Thousands of people underground, maybe tens of thousands. A hidden nation beneath America's feet. "What do we do?" Officer Winters asked. She'd proven herself trustworthy, untouched by watcher influence. "We prepare," Cornelius said. "They'll surface eventually. When they do, we need to be ready. Not for war, they're too embedded for that. But for the choice society will have to make." What choice? Whether forced salvation is better than free suffering. Whether security matters more than liberty. Whether the ends justify the means. He looked at the photo on his desk. Mehitable Crowthorne, the janitor whose discovery had started everything. She'd died for finding the truth about the old watchers. But the new truth was more complex, more insidious. The old watchers killed the unwanted. The new watchers collected them. Which was worse? And in a society that had already abandoned these people, did it matter? The count had indeed resumed, but now it wasn't deaths. It was captures, salvation, transformations. And somewhere, 17 sanctuaries beneath American soil, the new watchers were building their better world. One missing person at a time. 2 years passed with an uneasy stalemate. The sanctuaries continued operating. People continued disappearing. And law enforcement found itself paralyzed by jurisdictional complexity and public ambivalence. Chief Cornelius Blackwood had aged visibly. The weight of knowing about an underground nation he couldn't stop etching lines into his face. The breaking point came on a cold February morning when Officer Rachel Winters didn't report for her shift. Her apartment was neat, bed made, no signs of struggle, only a note on her kitchen table. Going to see for myself. Our Cornelius knew immediately what had happened. Rachel had volunteered to be taken. 3 months earlier, her younger brother had disappeared. A 22-year-old opioid addict who'd been living on the streets. The family had searched desperately, but Cornelius had seen the pattern. Young, addicted, no stable address, prime sanctuary candidate. The note continued on the back. If David is down there, I need to know he's safe. If the sanctuaries are what they claim, maybe it's better than letting him die. I'll find a way to report back. Trust me, R. Cornelius should have reported it immediately, initiated a manhunt. Instead, he sat in his office, staring at the note, wondering if Rachel might accomplish what years of investigation hadn't, getting real intelligence from inside a sanctuary. His phone rang that afternoon. Philemon Goodbody. Your officer is in Sanctuary 3, beneath Detroit. She'll be processed, evaluated, assigned housing and work. Don't worry, we know who she is. She won't be harmed. She's a cop. You can't just... She volunteered, Cornelius. Walked into one of our intake points. Said she wanted to find her brother. We don't turn away volunteers. Intake points? Philemon chuckled. You think we just snatch people off streets? We have recruitment centers in every major city, homeless shelters that offer more than soup, drug clinics that provide permanent solutions. Desperate people come to us. Let her go. She can leave any time she wants, after orientation. After she sees what we really are, most choose to stay. And those who don't are released with memory suppression therapy. They remember being sick, getting better, nothing specific. Protects the sanctuaries while respecting their choice. That's not respect, that's manipulation. Everything is manipulation, Cornelius. Your badge manipulates people into compliance. Laws manipulate behavior through fear of punishment. We just manipulate toward productivity rather than punishment. The line went dead. For 2 weeks, there was no word from Rachel. Cornelius covered for her absence, claiming she was on special assignment. He monitored all channels, waiting for any communication. Then, at exactly 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, his secure phone received a text from an unknown number. Chief, it's Rachel. They let me use a communication terminal as part of integration therapy. David is here. He's alive, clean, working in agricultural section. Has been for 3 months. He looks healthier than I've seen him in years. This place is not what we thought. Not prison, more like a very controlled rehabilitation community. Population here is 3,847. We'll report more when possible. They're watching this communication. R. Before Cornelius could respond, another message came through. This is Sanctuary Administrator Collins. Your officer is adapting well. She's been assigned to Security Division. Her skills are valuable. She can communicate with you once weekly, supervised. We want you to understand what we're building here. Transparency serves everyone. Over the following months, Rachel's reports painted a complex picture of sanctuary life. The underground city was sophisticated. Residential sectors, commercial districts, manufacturing zones, agricultural domes. People worked 8-hour shifts, earned credits for extras beyond basic provisions, could request job changes, education, even entertainment. But they couldn't leave. The exit doors exist, Rachel reported in one message, but they require administrative approval. In 6 months, I've seen 12 people request departure. 8 change their minds after counseling. 3 were approved and left with memory suppression. 1 disappeared. They say he was transferred to another sanctuary, but people whispered differently. She described the population: former addicts, homeless, criminals, but also volunteers, people who'd chosen the structured life underground over chaos above. Families had formed, children had been born. The first generation of sanctuary natives who'd never known the surface world. David doesn't want to leave, she wrote in month 4. He has a girlfriend, a job he enjoys, friends. He says the surface nearly killed him, and he'd rather be confined and alive than free and dead. I want to argue, but Chief, I see his point. Is freedom worth anything if it only offers freedom to suffer? The ethical questions tormented Cornelius. He shared Rachel's reports with Agent Mitchell, who'd never fully recovered psychologically from her own sanctuary experience. She'd started attending philosophy classes, reading about utilitarianism, social contracts, the nature of freedom. "What if they're right?" she said one evening, exhausted after another fruitless strategy meeting. Not their methods, but their premise. Society has failed these people. We offer them nothing but jail or death. The sanctuaries offer life, purpose, community. Yes, without freedom. But is our freedom real when economic and social forces trap people in cycles of poverty and addiction? You're defending kidnapping. I'm questioning whether it's kidnapping if the alternative is abandonment. We've already imprisoned these people in poverty, in addiction, in mental illness. The Watchers just made the prison literal but livable. Their debate was interrupted by urgent news. The governor of Nevada had called a press conference. Behind him stood Philemon Goodbody and 5 other individuals in matching gray suits. "Today," the governor announced, "I'm revealing a partnership that's been developing for 2 years. The Federal Sanctuary Program, a revolutionary approach to homelessness, addiction, and rehabilitation." The press room erupted. Philemon stepped forward, now using the title Director Goodbody. "For 12 years, we've operated in shadow, building communities for those society abandoned. Today, we emerge into light. 17 sanctuaries across America, housing 47,000 residents. Not prisoners, citizens of a new kind of community." He presented statistics: 89% reduction in drug dependency, 94% employment rate, 78% reported life satisfaction among residents, medical breakthroughs that had saved thousands of lives, agricultural innovations that could address food scarcity, educational programs that had turned illiterate adults into skilled professionals. We propose federal recognition and regulation, transform the sanctuaries from hidden necessities to transparent solutions, allow voluntary entrance and, after appropriate assessment, voluntary exit, create a parallel society for those who need structure to survive. The revelation split the nation. Protesters demanded immediate release of all sanctuary residents. Others, particularly families of addicts and homeless individuals, supported the program. Politicians scrambled to take positions on something they'd never imagined. Cornelius watched the press conference from his office, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. The Watchers hadn't been stopped. They'd won by transforming from secret murderers to public saviors. His phone rang. Rachel. "Chief, something's happening here. They're preparing for Liberation Day, offering everyone a choice. Stay with federal recognition or leave with full memories intact. But there's a catch." "What catch?" "Those who leave get relocated, new identities, starting capital. But they can never speak publicly about their experience. Legal agreements, NDAS, the works. And those who stay, they're talking about expansion, making the sanctuaries cities of millions, not thousands. Rachel, you need to get out." You and David both. David won't leave. He's deputy section chief now, engaged, planning a family. This is his life. And Chief, I'm not sure I want to leave either. Rachel, I've been here 8 months. I've seen people transform from dying addicts to productive citizens. Yes, it's controlled. Yes, it's limited. But it works. And I'm helping people here, really helping. Not just arresting them to release them to the same circumstances. You're experiencing Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe, or maybe I'm seeing clearly for the first time. The surface world failed these people. We failed them. At least here they have a chance. The call ended with Rachel promising to think about it, but Cornelius heard the decision in her voice. He was losing her to the same system he'd fought against. 3 weeks later, Congress held emergency hearings on the sanctuary program. Cornelius was called to testify, his history with the Watchers making him a key witness. The hearing room was packed. Philemon sat at the witness table, calm and professional, no longer the nervous informant from years ago but a confident administrator of a shadow nation. The old Watchers were wrong, Philemon testified. They destroyed life. We preserve it. They eliminated the unwanted. We rehabilitate them. They were criminals. We're pioneers of a new social model. Senator Patricia questioned him aggressively. You're holding American citizens against their will. We're providing structure for those who have proven unable to survive without it. Every resident underwent assessment. Those capable of independent living were offered it. Those who weren't were given an alternative to death. That's not your decision to make. Isn't it society's decision? We already involuntarily commit the mentally ill. We imprison criminals. We institutionalize the elderly. The sanctuaries simply expand this principle to include those dying from addiction, poverty, and despair. When Cornelius testified, he presented the evidence of the original Watchers' murders, the forced disappearances, the lack of real choice. But Philemon had counter-evidence, testimonials from residents, success stories, medical breakthroughs that had already saved lives on the surface. Chief Blackwood, asked Senator James Wright, given what you know now, if someone you loved was dying from addiction, would you want them in a sanctuary? Cornelius thought of Rachel, of her brother David, of the thousands who died on streets while society debated policy. I don't know, he admitted, and that's the horror of this. They've made us complicit by offering what we failed to provide, solution to suffering, even at the cost of freedom. The hearings continued for weeks. Sanctuary residents testified via video link, most supporting the program. Families testified both for and against. Philosophers debated the nature of freedom versus security. Medical researchers presented breakthroughs achieved through sanctuary research. During a break, Cornelius encountered someone unexpected in the hallway, Mayhittable Crowthorne's daughter, Patricia. Chief Blackwood, she said, thank you for fighting for my mother. I'm sorry we couldn't save her. She found the truth. That mattered to her. But Chief, if the sanctuaries had existed then, if they'd taken my brother instead of letting him die from overdose, I might have supported them. Does that make me terrible? It makes you human. They're exploiting our desperation, our love, our failure. That's what makes them so dangerous. Not that they're wrong, but that they might be right. The congressional vote was scheduled for December 15th. In the weeks leading up to it, the sanctuaries opened their doors to selected journalists, researchers, and officials. The tours were carefully managed, but what they showed was impressive. Functioning cities, productive citizens, advanced technology. But Cornelius noticed what wasn't shown: the security systems, the punishment sectors mentioned in some testimonials, the deep residents who'd been there longest and rarely appeared in public areas. Rachel managed to send one last uncensored message. "Chief, the vote's going to pass. They have leverage we didn't know about." Sanctuary residents include relatives of 12 senators, 43 representatives, hundreds of state officials, children, siblings, parents who died years ago, actually saved and rehabilitated. If the program is rejected, these people disappear forever. If approved, controlled reunions are possible. The Watchers played the longest game imaginable. They have hostages who don't know they're hostages, leverage that looks like mercy. Get out, Chief. Leave the country if you can. When they surface fully, anyone who opposed them will be remembered. I'm sorry, I'm staying. David needs me, and maybe this is where I can do the most good. Thank you for everything. Rachel. The vote was 67 to 33 in the Senate, 298 to 137 in the House. The federal sanctuary program was officially recognized, regulated, and funded. Within hours, entrance applications flooded in. Desperate families offering addicted relatives, homeless individuals volunteering themselves, even middle-class citizens attracted to the structure and security. Cornelius submitted his resignation the day after the vote. At his farewell ceremony, few attended. He'd become a reminder of an uncomfortable truth, that America had accepted internment as solution to social problems, that freedom had been traded for security, that the Watchers had won by evolving from murderers to wardens. Agent Mitchell found him packing his office. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Canada, maybe. Somewhere the sanctuaries haven't reached, yet. They'll expand. You know that. This is just the beginning. Other countries are already inquiring about the model. Then we've lost, have we? Or have we just redefined winning? The old Watchers killed 347 people over 170 years. The new ones have saved thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Yes, at the cost of freedom. But what's freedom worth if it only means freedom to die? Everything, Cornelius said firmly. Freedom is worth everything. Because once we accept that some people can be confined for their own good, where does it stop? The addicted today, the unemployed tomorrow, the dissidents eventually. We've opened a door that can't be closed. Mitchell pulled out an envelope. From Philomen. He asked me to give this to you. Inside was a single photo. The sanctuary beneath Las Vegas, now expanded to house. People walking through clean streets. Children playing in parks. On the back was written, "We built Utopia. You're welcome to visit. Room 275 is reserved for you whenever you're ready to see the future. PG." Cornelius burned the photo and left Millbrook that night. 5 years later, from his cabin in rural British Columbia, he watched the news of the first sanctuary built in Canada. 10 years later, they were global. Hundreds of underground cities housing millions of voluntary residents who couldn't quite explain why they'd volunteered. The old Watchers' dream of social cleansing had been achieved, not through murder, but through something worse. Convincing society that imprisonment was salvation, that control was care, that the cage was home. Rachel never contacted him again, but he sometimes received anonymous packages containing photos from inside the sanctuaries. Pictures of David with his children, the first generation born underground. Pictures of Rachel, older, wearing an administrator's uniform, surrounded by people she'd helped rehabilitate. Pictures of a society that functioned perfectly because it had surrendered the chaos of choice. In his final journal entry before his death at 83, Cornelius wrote, "The old Watchers were monsters who thought they were heroes, killing the unwanted to purify society. The new Watchers are heroes who don't realize they're monsters, saving the unwanted by stealing their freedom. Both believed they were evolution. Both were right. Society evolved, from disposing of its problems to containing them, from murder to management, from elimination to absorption. The count that began in 1851 with Abraham Millbrook never truly ended. It just transformed from counting the dead to counting the confined. 47,000 when revealed, 500,000 within 5 years, 5 million within a decade. By the time I die, analysts project 50 million worldwide, a hidden nation of the saved and controlled, the rehabilitated and restricted, the alive but not free. They called it the answer to social collapse. History will call it the greatest prison ever built, sold to us as paradise. And the worst part? The inmates thank their wardens. The prisoners defend their cells. The controlled celebrate their controllers. We didn't defeat the watchers. We became them. All of us, complicit in deciding that some people deserved the safety more than freedom, that society's smooth functioning matters more than individual liberty, that the cage is acceptable if it's comfortable enough. Mehitable Crowthorne died exposing the truth about murder. I lived to see that truth evolve into something worse. Murder of the spirit disguised as salvation of the body. The sanctuaries aren't the future. They're the beginning of the end of human freedom, one voluntary admission at a time. But who will listen to an old man in the woods warning about prisons that look like paradise? No one. Because the truth is too comfortable to resist. It's easier to manage the suffering than solve it. It's easier to contain the different than accept them. It's easier to build dungeons than dismantle the systems that make them necessary. The Watchers won. We let them, and most terrifying of all, we're grateful. The count continues. Not bodies, but souls. Not murdered, but something worse, managed. Forever. Cornelius Blackwood died alone on September 15th, exactly 20 years after discovering the first basement full of photographs. His cabin contained thousands of documents about the sanctuaries, evidence of their expansion, testimonials from residents both grateful and terrified. The local authorities found his body 3 days later. The cause of death was listed as natural causes, heart failure in an elderly man, but those who knew him wondered. The syringe mark on his arm was subtle. The peaceful expression suggested no struggle. And on his desk, placed after death, was a photo, room 275 in Sanctuary 1, decorated and ready, with a placard reading, "Reserved for Detective Cornelius Blackwood. Welcome home." The new watchers had given him a choice in the end: die free or live controlled. He'd chosen freedom, even in death. But they'd had the last word anyway, preparing his place in their underground paradise, waiting for a resident who would never come. The old station in Millbrook was eventually demolished, the basement filled with concrete, the ground salted and abandoned. But the sanctuary entrance built beneath it thrived, processing hundreds of volunteers daily, each one choosing security over freedom, structure over chaos, life over liberty. And somewhere in the administrative offices of Sanctuary 3, Director Rachel Winters, promoted after exceptional service, filed away Cornelius's obituary in a folder marked 275 declined. She'd offered to attend his funeral, but the sanctuary administration denied her surface leave. After all, she'd chosen her prison, and the prison, in return, had chosen her, forever. Officer Jebediah Makepeace had been patrolling the streets of Millbrook for only 3 years, but he'd developed an instinct for recognizing faces. In a city of 90,000, you started seeing the same people: the morning joggers, the night shift workers, the corner dealers, the homeless regulars. It was part of the job, building a mental catalog of who belonged where and when. That's why the woman stood out. The first time he saw her was on a Tuesday night in October, around 11:30 p.m. She was standing at the corner of 5th and Madison under a broken streetlight. Middle-aged, average height, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a navy blue jacket and jeans. Nothing remarkable except for how still she stood, like she was waiting for something specific. Jebediah slowed his patrol car, lowered the window. "Everything all right, ma'am?" She turned to look at him, and something in her expression made him uneasy. Not fear or guilt, recognition, like she knew him, had expected him. "Officer Makepeace," she said, reading his nameplate. "Just waiting for a friend." "At this hour? This isn't the safest neighborhood." She smiled slightly. "I'll be fine. Have a good night, officer." He drove on, but something bothered him about the encounter. He made a note in his log. 2332, contact with female, approximately 45 to 50, 5th and Madison. No issues. 3 nights later, he saw her again. This time at Riverside Park, 2 miles from the first location. Same clothes, exactly the same clothes down to a small stain on the jacket sleeve he'd noticed before. She was sitting on a bench, watching the empty playground. "Ma'am," he said, approaching on foot. "We meet again." She looked up, that same recognition in her eyes. "Officer Makepeace, working late again?" "Every night this week. You too, apparently." "I don't sleep well. Walking helps. You should vary your route." "Same clothes every night makes you a target." She looked down at her outfit, as if seeing it for the first time. "I suppose you're right. Habit is hard to break." "What's your name?" "Sophronia," she said after a pause. "Sophronia Wheelwright." He ran the name later. No records, no driver's license, no address, no credit history. Sophronia Wheelwright didn't exist in any system he could access. The third encounter was different. 1 week after the park, he responded to a domestic disturbance at an apartment complex. The caller had reported screaming from Unit 4B, possible violence. But when Jebediah arrived, the apartment manager insisted 4B had been vacant for months. "The neighbors are jumpy," the manager, Carl, explained. "Been some break-ins lately. They probably heard something from outside." Jebediah checked anyway. The apartment was indeed empty. No furniture, dust on the floors, mail piled under the door slot. But in the bedroom, standing by the window, was Sophronia Wheelwright. Same clothes, same ponytail, same unsettling recognition. "Ma'am, this is private property. How did you get in here?" "I used to live here," she said softly. "Years ago, sometimes I come back to remember. Carl says this unit's been empty for months." "Carl's new. He wouldn't know me." She walked past him, out of the apartment, down the stairs. He followed, intending to question her further, but when he reached the parking lot, she was gone. No car leaving, no figure walking away, just gone. He called it in to his captain, Thaddeus Grimwald, a 30-year veteran who'd seen everything twice. "Grimwald here. Captain, I need to run something by you. A woman I keep encountering. Same appearance, different locations, no records in the system. Probably homeless, using a fake name. She doesn't seem homeless. And Captain, she knew my name before I introduced myself." There was a pause. "Makepeace, you been getting enough sleep?" "Yes, sir. Take your scheduled days off. Don't let this job make you paranoid." But Jebediah couldn't let it go. He started documenting every encounter, taking photos when possible. But here was the strange thing. She never appeared in them. He'd snap a picture of the corner where she'd been standing, the bench where she'd been sitting, but she was always just out of frame, or had moved at the last second. The fourth encounter came 2 weeks later. He was investigating a reported break-in at a warehouse on the industrial side of town. The place had been closed for years, but someone had seen lights inside. He found her in the warehouse office, looking through old filing cabinets. "Sophronia, this is breaking and entering." She didn't run, didn't resist. "I'm looking for something." "What?" "Proof that I existed." She showed him a file, employment records from 1978. There was a photo paper-clipped to a form. The woman in the photo looked exactly like Sophronia, same face, same age, but the name was different, Susan Wheeler. "That's my mother," Sophronia said. "People always said we looked alike." "Your mother worked here 45 years ago?" "She disappeared from here, October 15th, 1978, night shift. They found her car, her purse, but never her. I was 3 years old." Jebediah studied the photo, then Sophronia. The resemblance was uncanny, not just similar, but identical. "Why didn't you tell me you were investigating your mother's disappearance? Would you have believed me?" A woman with no records, looking for another woman who vanished decades ago? He helped her search the files. Found work schedules, time cards, even a police report from 1978. Officer on the case, T. Grimwald. "That's my captain," Jebediah said. "He was a rookie then." "I know," Sophronia said. "That's why I'm here. That's why I keep appearing where you'll find me. I need you to ask him what really happened." "Why don't you ask him yourself?" "He won't see me." "I've tried. His secretary says he's busy, in meetings, out of office. For 3 months, I've tried." Jebediah took the file. "I'll ask him. But Sophronia, I need real information from you. Real name, real address, real identification." She pulled out a driver's license. "Sophronia Wheelwright, address in Portland, Oregon." The photo was her, but something seemed off about it. "I'll be at 5th and Madison tomorrow night," she said. 11:30, you can tell me what he says." The next day, Jebediah brought the file to Captain Grimwald. The older man's face went pale when he saw the photograph. "Where did you get this?" "The old Henderson warehouse. There's a woman looking into her mother's disappearance. Susan Wheeler, you worked the case." Grimwald closed the file, handed it back. "That case was closed. Runaway. Woman had debts, bad marriage, probably started fresh somewhere else." "Her daughter doesn't think so." "Her daughter?" Grimwald's voice was sharp. "Susan Wheeler's daughter died in a car accident in 1981. 3-year-old girl named Sophie. I remember because we had to tell her during the investigation." Jebediah felt cold. "That's impossible. I've been talking to her." "You've been talking to someone claiming to be her. Makepeace, listen to me carefully. Stay away from this. Some cases, some people, they're better left buried." "Captain, what aren't you telling me?" Grimwald stood, walked to his window. "That warehouse. In 1978, it wasn't just a warehouse. The owner was running a side business, human trafficking. We found out later, too late. Susan Wheeler wasn't the only one who disappeared from there. But by the time we understood the evidence was gone, the owner had fled, and we had no bodies, no proof. So you covered it up. We had nothing to prosecute, and revealing what we suspected without proof would have caused panic, lawsuits, federal involvement. The decision came from above. Close the cases as runaways, monitor for new disappearances, wait for real evidence. And it never came? The disappearances stopped after October 1978. The owner, Anthony Morrison, was found dead in Mexico 2 months later. Case closed itself. Then who is Sophronia? Grimwald turned to look at him. "I don't know. But Makepeace, if someone's using that name, claiming to be that girl, they know things they shouldn't. Be very careful. That night, Jebediah went to 5th and Madison at 11:30. Sophronia was there, same spot, same clothes. What did he tell you? That you're supposed to be dead. Car accident, 1981. She smiled sadly. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. What do you mean, what they wanted everyone to believe? Jebediah asked. Sophronia pulled out a manila envelope from her jacket. The accident was staged. My mother didn't disappear. She escaped. From them. From the trafficking ring. She took me and ran, but they found us 3 years later. Made it look like an accident. If you survived, where have you been for 40 years? Foster care under a different name until I was 18, then hiding, moving, never staying anywhere long enough to be tracked. But I kept investigating, piecing together what happened. My mother left clues, breadcrumbs. That's how I found out about the warehouse, about Grimwald. Captain Grimwald was a rookie. He couldn't have been involved. Not in the trafficking. But in the cover-up, he was the perfect choice. Young, ambitious, willing to follow orders to advance his career. Jebediah wanted to dismiss it as conspiracy theory, but something nagged at him. The way Grimwald had reacted to the photo, his insistence on leaving things buried. Prove it, he said. Show me evidence. Meet me tomorrow, Riverside Park, midnight. I'll show you everything. She walked away, and this time Jebediah followed. She turned down an alley, and when he rounded the corner seconds later, she was gone. No doors she could have entered, no windows low enough to climb through. Just gone. He spent the next day researching. Found the accident report from 1981, a single car crash. Driver Susan Wheeler. Passenger Sophie Wheeler, age 3. Both bodies severely burned, identified by dental records. But something was wrong with the report. The officer who filed it was Anthony Morrison, the same name as the warehouse owner who'd supposedly fled to Mexico. Jebediah dug deeper. Anthony Morrison, according to records, had joined the force in 1979, worked for 2 years, then resigned in 1981, just after the accident. The timeline didn't make sense. How could he be a warehouse owner fleeing to Mexico in 1978 and a police officer in 1979? He pulled Morrison's personnel file. The photo was grainy, but the man looked wrong, face slightly off, like someone wearing prosthetics. The background check was thin, references that led nowhere, previous addresses that didn't exist. Anthony Morrison was a fake identity. Someone had infiltrated the police force under an assumed name. At midnight, Jebediah went to Riverside Park. Sophronia was waiting with a box of documents. My mother was an accountant at the warehouse, she began. She discovered the trafficking operation. They were moving people through the warehouse at night using shipping containers. She collected evidence, was going to the FBI, but someone tipped them off. She showed him photocopies of ledgers, shipping manifests with coded entries, photographs of containers with air holes drilled in them. The night she disappeared, she was supposed to meet an FBI agent, Agent Patricia Reeves, but Reeves never showed. My mother was grabbed at the warehouse. I was at home with a babysitter. How did she escape? She didn't at first. They kept her for 3 weeks, trying to find out what she knew, who she'd told, but she convinced one of the guards to help her, promised him immunity if he testified. They escaped together, picked me up, ran. The guard was Anthony Morrison. No, the guard's name was Paul Brennan. He's the one who became Anthony Morrison, created a fake identity to hide from the trafficking ring. He joined the police to stay close to the investigation, to make sure it stayed buried. And the car accident. They found us. Paul tried to protect us, but they killed my mother, tried to kill me. Paul saved me, barely, put me in the system under a fake name, told everyone I'd died too. He kept watching over me for years, from a distance. Where is Paul Brennan now? Dead, real dead, 5 years ago, natural causes. But before he died, he told me everything, gave me these documents, told me who in the department had been involved in the cover-up. She pulled out a list, 3 names: Captain Thaddeus Grimwald, Lieutenant Harold Foster, retired, and Detective Sarah Kim, deceased. They weren't part of the trafficking, Sophronia explained, but they were paid to look the other way, to close the cases, to discredit anyone who asked questions. The ring had people everywhere: police, courts, child services. Why come back now? Why reveal yourself? Because someone's starting again. Same patterns, same methods. People disappearing from low-income neighborhoods. No investigation. Cases closed as runaways. Look. She showed him newspaper clippings from the past year. 7 missing persons, all fitting a profile. Young, isolated, no family to ask questions. Jebediah recognized some of the names. Cases that had crossed his desk, been marked as runaways, filed away. Captain Grimwald's signature on the closure forms. You think Grimwald's involved in a new trafficking ring? I think he never stopped being involved. The old ring didn't die. It evolved, got smarter. They don't use warehouses now. They use legitimate businesses, shell companies, official channels, and they have police protection. That's a serious accusation. Then investigate. Pull the files on those 7 missing persons. Check who owned the properties they were last seen at. Follow the money. She stood to leave, but Jebediah grabbed her arm. It was solid, real, warm. Why the games? Why appear and disappear? Why the same clothes? She looked down at his hand on her arm. I wear the same clothes so you'll recognize me, remember me. I appear where you'll be because I've been watching your patrol patterns for months. I disappear because I've spent 40 years learning how to vanish, memorizing blind spots, using service tunnels, knowing exactly when to move. The photo I took, I saw you raise your phone, stepped aside, old habit. It was all explicable, all rational, but something still felt off. Show me your driver's license again. She handed it over. This time, he really studied it. The hologram was wrong, the font slightly off. It was an excellent fake, but fake nonetheless. Sophronia Wheelwright doesn't exist, he said. No, she agreed. Sophie Wheeler died in 1981, according to all records. I've been Jennifer Mills, Sarah Patterson, a dozen other names. But I'm still her, still the girl who lost her mother to men who thought people could be bought and sold. What do you really want from me? Justice, or at least truth. You're clean, Makepeace. 3 years on the force, no connections to the old network. Grimwald doesn't own you yet. You can investigate without suspicion. And if I find what you claim, then we expose it. Publicly, loudly, in a way they can't cover up. Jebediah took the box of documents. Give me a week, I'll verify what I can. But Sophronia, Jennifer, whoever you are, if this is some elaborate hoax, it's not. Check the property records for 447 Industrial Way. Shell company owned, purchased 6 months ago. Used to be a trucking depot. Now it's supposedly empty. But drive by at 3 a.m., count the vehicles. Wonder why an empty building needs so much traffic. She walked away, and this time Jebediah let her go. Over the next week he investigated carefully. The 7 missing persons files all had irregularities. Witnesses who were never interviewed, evidence that was never processed, security footage that was mysteriously corrupted. The properties where they'd last been seen were all owned by different companies, but digging deeper, all those companies traced back to a single holding corporation, Morrison Enterprises. Anthony Morrison's name, but incorporated in 2019, long after the fake Morrison had supposedly died. He drove by 447 Industrial Way at 3 a.m., counted 12 vehicles, including 2 police cruisers. Ran the plates. They came back as decommissioned, supposedly destroyed years ago. The next day, he tried to access the holding corporation's records. His computer access was immediately flagged. Within an hour, Captain Grimwald called him into his office. "Makepeace, you've been accessing restricted files. Following up on missing persons cases, sir. Cases that have been closed. Why? Irregularities, patterns. I think you think too much. You're a patrol officer, not a detective. Stay in your lane." "Captain, are you aware of Morrison Enterprises?" Grimwald's face went very still. "Where did you hear that name?" "Property records. They own buildings where missing persons were last seen." "Coincidence? The city has thousands of properties, hundreds of missing persons. Patterns emerge from random data. Don't create conspiracies where none exist." "Sir, Officer Makepeace, you're a good cop with a promising future. Don't jeopardize that by chasing ghosts. The woman you've been talking to, Sophie Wheeler or whatever she's calling herself, she's disturbed, traumatized by her mother's death, creating elaborate fantasies to cope. Don't get pulled into her delusions." "You said she died in 1981. "I said that's what the records show. Clearly, someone survived and has spent 40 years building a conspiracy theory. Tragic, but not criminal. Leave it alone, Makepeace, that's an order. But Jebediah couldn't leave it alone. That night, he met Sophronia at their usual spot. "He knows," she said immediately. "Your computer access triggered alerts. You need to be careful now. Tell me about Morrison Enterprises. It's how they launder the money. The trafficking generates cash. They buy properties through the shell company, use them as waypoints for moving people, then sell them for clean profit. It's brilliant and completely legal on paper. We need more evidence. Then we need to get inside 447 Industrial Way. That's breaking and entering. That's saving lives. Those 7 missing people, if patterns hold, they're being held there before being moved. We have maybe days before they disappear forever." Jebediah made a decision that would change everything. "Tomorrow night, I'll go in, but not breaking and entering. I'll respond to a noise complaint from a concerned citizen. Gives me cause to investigate." "I'll be your concerned citizen," Sophronia said. 3 a.m., be ready." As she walked away, Jebediah called out, "Why do you trust me? How do you know I won't turn you into Grimwald?" She turned back. "Because you remind me of Paul Brennan. Someone who joined the force to help people, not hurt them. Someone who'd risk everything for the truth. He saved me once. Maybe you can save others." The next night at 2:55 a.m., dispatch received a call about strange noises from 447 Industrial Way. Officer Jebediah Makepeace responded. What he found there would validate everything Sophronia had told him and put both their lives in immediate danger. Officer Jebediah Makepeace arrived at 447 Industrial Way at 3:07 a.m., responding to the noise complaint. The building looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows on the upper floors, graffiti on the walls, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. But the 12 vehicles parked behind the building told a different story. He radioed in his arrival, following protocol. Dispatch, Unit 47 responding to noise complaint at 447 Industrial Way. Multiple vehicles on site. Investigating. Copy that, Unit 47. Backup available if needed. 10-4 will advise. Jebediah approached the main entrance. The door was locked, but he could hear something inside. Mechanical humming, like generators or large ventilation systems. Way too much power for an abandoned building. He circled to the loading dock. One of the bay doors was slightly raised, just enough for someone to duck under. He announced himself loudly, "Police!" "Anyone inside? This is Officer Makepeace. I'm responding to a noise complaint." No response, but the mechanical humming stopped abruptly. Someone had heard him. He ducked under the bay door, flashlight in one hand, other hand resting on his service weapon. The loading area was empty but clean. Too clean for an abandoned building. No dust, no debris, fresh tire tracks on the concrete. Moving deeper into the building, he found the source of the humming. Industrial air circulation systems, the kind used in underground parking garages or spaces where people were being kept in confined areas without windows. He heard footsteps above, multiple people moving quickly. Then voices, muffled but urgent. He couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Panic. Jebediah found a stairwell, started climbing. The second floor was a maze of corridors and small rooms. In one, he found mattresses on the floor, buckets in the corner, chains bolted to the walls. Empty now, but recently used, the smell of human occupation was unmistakable. His radio crackled. Unit 47, status check. Dispatch, I need backup at this location. Possible crime scene. Negative, Unit 47. Captain Grimwald advises you to exit the building immediately. No crime has been reported. Jebediah's blood ran cold. How did Grimwald know he was here? Unless dispatch had alerted him specifically, which meant, "Dispatch, who am I speaking with?" Officer Patricia Wells, Unit 47. Patricia Wells worked day shift. She shouldn't be on duty at 3 a.m. He turned off his radio, pulled out his personal cell phone, called 911 directly. 911, what is your emergency? This is Officer Makepeace, badge 447. I need immediate backup at 447 Industrial Way. Officers on scene, potential hostage situation. Officer Makepeace, we show you off duty tonight. I'm responding to a complaint. Send backup now. Units are en route. He heard vehicles outside, not arriving, leaving. Engines starting, tires squealing. They were evacuating. Jebediah ran to a window. The parking lot was emptying rapidly, but one van remained. He saw figures being loaded into it, 7 people, hands bound, being pushed by men in dark clothing. One of the men turned, and even from a distance Jebediah recognized him. Lieutenant Harold Foster, supposedly retired. He ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. By the time he reached the parking lot, the van was pulling away. He memorized the license plate, then ran to his patrol car, but his tires had been slashed, all 4, cut deep. Real backup arrived 8 minutes later, 2 units responding to his 911 call. By then, the building was empty, except for the evidence. The mattresses, chains, and, in a locked office, documents that had been partially burned in a metal trash can. Jebediah retrieved what he could. Shipping manifests with dates and destinations, names of people being transferred. Some matched the missing persons he'd been investigating. Detective Maria Santos arrived to process the scene. She was clean, one of the few Jebediah trusted completely. Jesus, Makepeace, what did you stumble into? Human trafficking ring. Operating out of this building. They were moving people tonight when I showed up. You ID any of them? Harold Foster was here. He's supposed to be retired. Maria's face darkened. Foster was dirty when he was active. if he's involved." She pulled him aside, lowered her voice. "Makepeace, you need to be very careful. This goes high up. How did you know to come here?" "Anonymous tip." "From who?" Before he could answer, Captain Grimwald arrived. His face was calm, but his eyes were furious. "Officer Makepeace, you were off duty tonight." "I responded to a complaint, sir." "Without authorization." "Without following protocol. You contaminated a crime scene." "I discovered a crime scene." "You discovered an abandoned building with some old mattresses. Everything else is speculation." Maria spoke up. "Captain, the evidence suggests—" "Detective Santos, I'll handle this. Makepeace, you're suspended pending investigation. Badge and gun." "Captain, that's an order." Jebediah had no choice. He handed over his badge and service weapon, but he kept copies of the documents he'd photographed with his phone, sent them to his personal email before anyone could confiscate his device. As he left, Maria caught up with him. "Meet me at the diner on Route 9 tomorrow, 6 a.m., come alone." That night, Jebediah's apartment was broken into while he slept. Nothing stolen, but a message was clear. They could get to him any time. His phone rang at 4 a.m., unknown number. "Officer Makepeace." It was Sophronia. "I heard what happened. You're in danger." "Where are you?" "Safe house. You need to disappear too." "I'm not running." "Then you're dead. Foster doesn't leave loose ends. Neither does Grimwald. You knew this would happen. I hoped you'd find evidence before they noticed." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for—" "Where are the people from the van?" "Probably at the secondary site. Industrial shipping complex near the airport. Building 47, they like that number, but it's heavily guarded. You can't go there alone." "I'm suspended. I can't go there at all." "Then we need help. Federal help. FBI, DEA, someone outside Grimwald's influence." At 6 a.m., Jebediah met Maria at the diner. She looked exhausted, worried. "I ran the plate you gave me," she said. "Van's registered to Morrison Enterprises." I dug deeper. They own 17 properties in the state. All industrial, all with suspicious activity reports that were never investigated. Because Grimwald buried them. Him and others. Makepeace, this is organized crime embedded in law enforcement. We need federal intervention. How do we get it without going through channels Grimwald controls? Maria pulled out a business card. Agent Patricia Reeves, FBI. She investigated a similar ring in Nevada 5 years ago. I've already called her. She's flying in today. The name triggered something. Patricia Reeves. Sophronia mentioned that name. She was supposed to meet with Susan Wheeler in 1978, but never showed. Different Patricia Reeves. This one's daughter. Her mother was killed in 1978, supposedly a car accident, but she always suspected it was connected to a case her mother was working. The pieces were connecting. The trafficking ring hadn't just killed Susan Wheeler, they'd killed the FBI agent investigating them. And now, 45 years later, the daughter was coming to finish what her mother started. That afternoon, Jebediah met with Agent Reeves at a secure location outside the city. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, all business. "Officer Makepeace, Detective Santos briefed me. I've been tracking Morrison Enterprises for 3 years. They operate in 7 states, moving people through legitimate shipping channels. We've been building a RICO case, but we needed someone on the inside to break it open." "I'm suspended." "I'm not inside anymore." "But your informant is." "Sophronia Wheelwright, or whatever her real name is. We need her testimony, her evidence." "She won't come forward unless she's guaranteed protection." "She'll have it." "Full witness protection, new identity, relocation. But we move tonight. My team is already in position. we're raiding all 17 properties simultaneously at midnight. We need to know which one has the victims." Jebediah called Sophronia. She answered immediately. "Building 47 at the airport complex," she said. "I've been watching. 7 people went in 3 hours ago. They'll be moved at dawn to a cargo ship bound for international waters." "How do you know?" "Because I've been tracking these patterns for years. Every third Thursday they ship out. Always dawn, always by boat. This is your only chance." Agent Reeves mobilized her team. But they had a problem. Someone was leaking information. An hour before the raid, the buildings started emptying. Vehicles leaving. Evidence being destroyed. "We have a mole," Reeves said grimly. "Someone in my team or yours." Jebediah thought about it. "What if it's simpler? What if they're monitoring police communications? Then we go dark. No radios, no phones, just surprise." At 11:47 p.m., they hit Building 47. No warning, no announcement. Flashbangs through the windows. Tactical teams through every entrance. The resistance was fierce but brief. 15 arrests, including Harold Foster, who tried to flee but was tackled by Jebediah himself. Suspension or not, Reeves had temporarily deputized him as a federal asset. In a locked container, they found them. 7 people, dehydrated, terrified, but alive. The same 7 who'd been reported missing over the past months. But Captain Thaddeus Grimwald wasn't there. Neither were the shipment records, the financial documents, the evidence that would prove the full scope of the operation. Foster, bleeding from where Jebediah had tackled him, laughed. "You got nothing." These people were being housed temporarily, waiting for immigration processing. All legal, all documented. You'll never prove otherwise. Agent Reeves leaned in close. "We have a witness. Someone who's been documenting your operation for years." "You mean the ghost? Sophie Wheeler? Good luck putting a dead woman on the stand." That's when Sophronia walked in, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was another woman, elderly, walking with a cane. "Hello, Harold," the elderly woman said. "Remember me?" Foster's face went white. "Susan, you're dead." Susan Wheeler, now in her 80s, very much alive, smiled coldly. "Your friends were sloppy. The car accident only killed the woman they thought was me, my sister, who was helping us hide. I've been in witness protection for 45 years, waiting for this moment." "That's impossible. We checked." "You checked what Paul Brennan wanted you to check. He saved my daughter and me, gave us new identities, helped us disappear. But he also kept records. Everything, every transaction, every shipment, every murder. It's all documented." Sophronia, the real Sophie Wheeler, pulled out a safety deposit box key. "Federal Savings and Loan, Box 447. Paul left it for us when he died. 40 years of evidence, names, dates, amounts. Where the bodies are buried, literally." Foster tried to lunge at them but was restrained by federal agents. The contents of the safety deposit box were devastating. The trafficking ring had operated since the 1960s, moving thousands of people, generating millions in profit. Police chiefs, judges, city councilors, all implicated. Captain Grimwald was arrested at his home at dawn, trying to burn documents in his backyard. He said nothing, demanded a lawyer, but the evidence was overwhelming. During his interrogation, one detail emerged that chilled everyone. The ring wasn't just trafficking people for labor or sex. They were supplying subjects for medical experiments, off-the-books research funded by pharmaceutical companies testing drugs on people who wouldn't be missed. "We were cleaning the streets," Grimwald said finally, his composure cracking. "Homeless, addicts, prostitutes, people who contributed nothing. At least this way, their lives had meaning. Medical advances came from those tests. Diseases were cured. "You're trying to justify slavery and murder," Reeves said. "I'm explaining reality. Someone has to make the hard choices. Someone has to decide who matters and who doesn't. We just made it official. The trials lasted 2 years. 147 people were convicted, including 12 police officers, 3 judges, and numerous business owners. The trafficking ring was dismantled, its victims freed and rehabilitated. Susan and Sophie Wheeler testified under heavy protection. Their testimony was crucial, providing historical context and evidence that connected decades of crimes. But the investigation also revealed a horrifying truth. Millbrook wasn't unique. Similar rings operated in dozens of cities, all using the same model: police protection, business fronts, vulnerable victims. The Morrison Enterprises structure was a franchise, a template that could be replicated anywhere. "We cut off one head," Agent Reeves told Jebediah after the trials, "but the Hydra has many more." Jebediah returned to duty after his suspension was lifted. He was promoted to detective, assigned to a new task force focused on human trafficking. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface. Sophie Wheeler disappeared after the trial, entering witness protection for real this time. But she left Jebediah a letter. "Thank you for believing me, for seeing me when everyone else saw a ghost." The woman who stands on street corners and disappears isn't gone. She's everywhere, in every city, waiting for someone to notice, to care, to act. Keep watching, keep listening. The recurring encounters aren't coincidences, they're cries for help. Don't stop seeing them. 5 years later, Detective Jebediah Makepeace was investigating another missing persons case when he saw her. A woman, standing on a corner, wearing the same clothes every night, appearing and disappearing in patterns. Different face, different city, but the same recognition in her eyes when she saw him. "Officer," she said, "I need your help. People are disappearing." He knew then that Sophie had been right. The pattern repeated. The trafficking continued, just with new faces, new methods, new protections. But now he knew what to look for. Now he knew how to fight it. The recurring encounters weren't ending. They were just beginning. 10 years had passed since the Millbrook trafficking ring trials. Detective Jebediah Makepeace, now 45 with gray creeping into his temples, had become something of an expert on organized trafficking operations. He'd helped dismantle similar rings in 3 other states, testified before Congress, written training manuals for identifying trafficking patterns. But the victory felt hollow. For every ring they destroyed, 2 more seemed to emerge. The methods evolved: cryptocurrency payments, encrypted communications, deeper corruption. The traffickers had learned from Millbrook's mistakes. He was reviewing cold cases in his office when his phone rang. Unknown number, but something made him answer. Detective Makepeace. The voice was elderly but strong. "Susan Wheeler." "Mrs. Wheeler? I thought you were in witness protection." "I left. I'm 93 years old, Detective. I'm not spending my last years in hiding, but I'm calling because Sophie needs you." "Is she in danger?" "She's in Los Angeles." She found another ring, bigger than Millbrook. But this time she's not just investigating, she's inside. Jebediah's blood went cold. Inside as in undercover. Has been for 2 years. She's gathered evidence on a network that spans 12 countries. But her handler at the FBI died last month, heart attack. The new handler doesn't know she exists. She's alone in there. Why call me? Because you're the only one who believed her when she was nobody, when she was just a ghost on street corners. She trusts you. And Detective, they're planning something massive. A shipment of 500 people, all at once, children included. Within 6 hours, Jebediah was on a plane to Los Angeles. Susan had given him a meeting location, the corner of 5th and Madison, the same street names where he'd first encountered Sophie in Millbrook. Not a coincidence. She was there at 11:30 p.m., same stance, same type of clothes, navy jacket and jeans, but older now, lines around her eyes, gray in her hair. When she saw him, relief flooded her face. "Jebediah, thank you for coming." "Sophie, what are you doing? This is insane. This is necessary." The new ring learned from Millbrook. They don't use cops, they use immigration officials, Port Authority, Homeland Security, people who can move humans across borders legally. She showed him a badge, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Special Agent Sarah Coleman. "I've been building this identity for 5 years," she explained. "Working my way up, gaining trust. I'm now coordinating the shipment. 500 people from various detention centers, supposedly being deported, but they'll never reach their home countries. Where will they go? International waters. Cargo ship registered in Liberia, captained by someone with no name and no past. From there, scattered to buyers worldwide. Labor camps, organ harvesting, worse. We need to stop it. We need to document it. If we stop it too early, the network survives, reorganizes. We need to catch them in the act, all of them, simultaneously." She handed him a flash drive. "Everything's on here, names, accounts, routes, but I need someone on the outside to coordinate the takedown, someone they won't suspect. The FBI has leaks. How do you think my handler conveniently died just as we were getting close? No, this needs to be multi-agency, sudden, complete. DEA, Coast Guard, Interpol, all at once." Jebediah took the drive. "When's the shipment?" "Tomorrow night, midnight, Port of Long Beach, Pier 47. "That's not enough time. It has to be. They moved up the timeline because someone got suspicious. Me, probably. My cover might be blown. Then you need to get out. If I run now, they all disappear. The 500 people still get shipped, just through different channels. I have to maintain cover until the last moment. Sophie, you'll die." She smiled sadly. "Maybe. But isn't that what I've been doing for 40 years? Dying and being reborn? Sophie Wheeler died in 1981. Sarah Patterson died in 1995. Jennifer Mills died in 2008. Maybe it's Sarah Coleman's turn. Don't be dramatic. We'll get you out. Promise me something? If I don't make it, tell my mother I finally understood. Sometimes you have to disappear to make others visible. Sometimes you have to become a ghost to give others life." Jebediah spent the next 18 hours in frantic preparation. Using contacts he'd built over a decade, he assembled a multi-agency task force. No official channels, no paperwork that could be leaked. Just trusted agents who'd converge on multiple locations simultaneously. At 11 p.m., he was in position at the port with 50 federal agents. Sophie had maintained her cover, was at the pier supervising the loading. The 500 detainees were being brought in buses, processed through what looked like legitimate deportation procedures. At 11:47 p.m., always that time, Sophie's signature, she gave the signal. A simple gesture, adjusting her ponytail. The raid was swift and devastating. Every exit blocked, every suspect surrounded. The crew of the cargo ship tried to flee, but were intercepted by the Coast Guard. The buses were stopped, the detainees liberated. But in the chaos, Jebediah lost sight of Sophie. He found her an hour later in a container on the ship. She'd been shot. One of the traffickers had recognized her at the last moment. She was alive, but badly wounded. "Did we get them all?" she asked, blood seeping through the pressure bandage Jebediah applied. "All of them, the whole network. You did it." "Good, good. Tell my mother. Tell her yourself. You're going to be fine. She survived, barely. 3 surgeries, 2 months in intensive care." The trial that followed was larger than Millbrook, 237 convictions, including high-ranking officials in 3 federal agencies. Sophie testified from a wheelchair, her voice strong despite her injuries. Her evidence was irrefutable. The network was destroyed, its leaders imprisoned for life. But at the sentencing, the lead trafficker said something that haunted everyone present. "You think you've won? We're a symptom, not the disease. As long as there are desperate people and those willing to exploit them, we'll exist. Cut us down, we grow back. Different faces, same hunger. The supply exists because the demand exists, and the demand is endless." After her recovery, Sophie Wheeler disappeared again. New identity, new location, but she sent Jebediah a final message. "The woman on the corner isn't gone. She's everywhere, in every city, every country, wherever people vanish and no one notices. Keep watching for her. When you see someone who appears and disappears, someone who seems like a ghost, look closer. They might be trying to tell you something. The recurring encounters never end because the need for witnesses never ends. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." Detective Jebediah Makepeace continued his work, trained new officers to recognize the patterns, to see the ghosts that weren't ghosts but people trying desperately to be noticed. And sometimes, late at night, patrolling the streets, he'd see them. Figures on corners, in the same clothes, appearing and disappearing. He'd stop, listen to their stories, follow their leads. Because Sophie had taught him the most important lesson of police work. The people who seem like they don't exist are often the ones who see everything. The recurring encounters weren't anomalies, they were evidence. And somewhere, in some city, another Sophie was standing on another corner, waiting for someone to notice, to believe, to act. The count of the saved continued, one ghost at a time.